9:30, time for me to open this session of the Enfield Local Plan Examination. I'm Stephen Lee, the Inspector appointed by the Secretary of State to examine the plan and report to the Council in due course. Good morning, everyone. Very compact and bijou group today. Numbers are dwindling as we go. I'm managing to put people off. Just a quick chat. I think I know everyone apart from you. Have you been before? Yes, yeah, that's good. Good. That's always good because I don't have to then to. Thank you, Mr. Hudson. I don't have to sort of. You've heard my laborious spiel before, so you don't need to go through it. So you know how things are going to go. So we can, I think, just get on with it. I think I will do introductions just for courtesy and avoidance of doubt. The other thing I'll just say, I think, because obviously we have yourself, Mr. Byrne. I will start. The agenda said start with PL6, but I'll start with. I think it's PL7 you're interested in, and then the site you're interested in as well, which I assume is 7.3. 7.3, and then obviously we'll move on. And I'll just talk about how, because obviously we're on to the third day of talking about the PL policy, so an awful lot of ground has been covered, which is, the same for all policies. So it may be that I sort of skirt over things because we've already discussed them, but clearly it doesn't. If you want to trace them, that's perfectly fine. So yeah, we'll do introductions then, see if any matters arising, and then we'll make a start. So, Mr. Reid, just introductions.
Thank you very much. So thank you. Morning. My name is Matthew Reid, King's Counsel, instructed by the Council to attend today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is May Hope. I'm Head of Strategic Planning and Design.
Good morning. Michael Kennedy, Urban Design and Heritage Manager.
Good morning, Rebecca Rain, Planning Policy Lead for London Borough of Enfield.
Good morning, everyone. Scott Hudson from Savills Planning on behalf of New Ladderswood LLP.
Good morning. I am Matt Byrne representing Better Homes Enfield.
Okay, thank you, everyone. All right. Are there, from the Council's point of view, any matters arising you wish to?
No, thank you very much. Not today. Thank you.
I think there are a couple of queries, I think, from yourselves through Net, which are sort of procedural things, so I'll get back to you about timings and things on those, but there's nothing I don't think that needs to be at the moment, because I haven't made a decision on them anyway. I think it's
yes,
just about programming and timing of documents, so
yes.
Nothing that's burning, I don't think. Okay, so, all right, so today's session, obviously we've got two of the remaining PL policies this morning, which are PL7 and PL6. And then this afternoon we've got PL8. I just spoke to it. Obviously, we are getting through these quite quickly. I think once we get to the end of PL6, there's a decision to be made about what we do about the afternoon. So we bring it forward or carry on. Obviously, there's a fairness. Are we being unfair if people? There's nobody coming to attend the Palmer's Green session, but obviously maybe people want to watch. Similarly, we might all benefit from a slightly longer break. I'm sure we've all got things to do between sessions, so it might not be a bad thing. But if it, so I think we'll just play it by ear. But it may well be even if we finish this session quite early, we still have quite a long. We come back at 2 o'clock, and yes, if that's okay, explain to the council, I suppose, because no one else is here.
Yes, for our part, sir, we're here all day, so
yeah, exactly. You may not want to be.
There's plenty that we're getting on with, so
right, yeah.
yes.
Yeah, okay. And it's also been an examination so far with quite unusual. There's been pretty full intensive days in every single session. So I don't think we've had many days where we've finished early or anything. So this might be unusual in that respect. So
it does balance up ultimately. I think
hopefully,
our hours are well spent. So there is a fire alarm scheduled today to let you know.
At 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. Yes, we've had that before. So yeah. So if we do start it, it'll be 2:05 anyway when we start. But we can see where we get to. So nobody's coming, but there may be some people who wish to attend or maybe watch online. I think if they watch online, it's recorded, so it's not necessarily prejudice anybody. But obviously, if anyone turns up, then we do tell people to keep an eye on the programme. It can change, but obviously it's very late notice if it changes today. Yeah. Anyway, sorry about that. That's all beside the point. So we'll start then with New Southgate, PL7. Go through the policy first. Again, there's a couple of things just for Mr. Hutton's benefit. It's not been to these sessions where I've asked questions where I've kind of discussed the point. So you may have obviously wish maybe it's something. The figure 3.7. I think say the council's acknowledged that all the figures are need work to make them legible, and they've also proposed to sort of have these a key with the symbols identified. With PL1, just to bring it up to date, I queried some of those symbols because they relate to documents that aren't in the development plan and how the status of that. So it's something I'm taking away with me. So there may well be further modifications relating to that, which obviously would relate to all of the allocation, all of the policies. There was also a point made about in some of the sites, some of these tables, they identify infill opportunities and what that meant in terms of, you know, whether they were sort of allocations or what status of those. So those are the sort of things we discussed, and I'll be taking those things away with me, but I don't think there's any need for me to raise anything on figure 3.7. Is there anything either yourselves want to raise about the figure 3.7? Thank you. And then the other point, one of the questions I've asked, which is a standard question, which was relevant to all the policies, is if you read them as submitted, there's an implication that every application within that particular area must comply with every criterion, which I guess the council read between the lines of my question, so that's probably not sound. And they've acknowledged that is the case, and I think again agreed that some wording needs to be added to all of the policies to make it clear that it's you know, where relevant, and the wording to be agreed, but also where relevant and to the scale, nature, location, etc. And I think the hope is that that would also, because obviously some of these policies will include effectively 106 requirements, and if you read them as it's submitted, the implication could be that every application must submit, you know, must be making these contributions, which obviously probably isn't the case. So hopefully the catch-all wording at the start of the policy would provide comfort that it on SIL issues as well, without saying in every single criterion, you know, where necessary for SIL or something like that, because that get quite repetitive. So that's that. Again, I don't know if you've if you made representation at that point. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on then to the substantive parts of the policy. I'm just going to go through my points that I've got on the policy and then open it up rather than open it for every criterion, because I've got huge numbers of questions, if I'm honest. Let me just get, sorry if I get to the modifications that have been proposed. Sorry about this, I'm just scrolling through the statement. Bear with me.
Page 24 says the...
Oh, thank you.
23 actually begins substantive.
Right, sorry. So criterion 1, again, a similar sort of a common theme about these policies often refer to comprehensive approaches. In this one, slightly different, because it's referred to a master planned approach, which is different. Some do, some don't. So I think my question was about who is intended to prepare the master plan and whether it's necessary. You did suggest a modification to that, which I think talks about SPD. I'm not sure. It's not the modification isn't underlined. It's all new text, I think, isn't it? So yeah, it's just where it fitted into the rest of criterion 1. I wasn't quite sure about. So is that replacing criterion 1? Just so in its entirety?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, not entirely. I think so. There does need to be some work done to that part, because so you'll have seen, to get to the nub of the point with regard to who's to do what. You'll see criterion 2 deals with the council preparing master plans potentially. So the aim is that there should be the provision of a master planned approach. Maybe the council that takes that step, but in in the event that that doesn't happen, then it defaults still to the requirement in overall terms that a master planned approach on the part of each of those sites should come forward.
And I think that's where I'm getting a bit confused, I suppose, in that some policies, and I think it might be Dr. Jones, when this came up in another of the PL, it's not about an overarching master plan, a la PL10, PL11. It's about every scheme having their own master plans, which should, in theory, knit together and not prejudice and so on. Is that more the point?
That's the default scenario, but the overarching point is that the council
So the council may do something.
Exactly so.
If they do, then have regard to it.
Exactly.
If not, we expect a master planned approach, presumably in line with SS2,
Exactly.
SSC2,
Quite.
or SS2, whichever it is. Okay, that's more understood. Yeah, because I think when I read comprehensive master planned approach, I'm seeing that in the same way as those other, where an applicant, if you like, a single applicant is somehow expected to fit into, which you might if there's SPD, but this overarching, between them they've got to produce a master plan. It's not the case. They've got to produce their own master plan that demonstrates comprehensive approach which fits in with the overall vision.
It's the same approach in that respect, albeit with a principal objective that the council will deliver or may deliver it.
I think then,
Criterion
as you say, probably somewhere along, there's some more tweaks are needed to that to make it clear. You heard when I talked about this on, I guess it was Tuesday. We've not covered that yet, but I think that policy does refer to master plans being required for 50 dwellings and 500 square metres of floor space, which I did say it on the face of it without having the council's justification, just because in fact that seems very low. So it may well be that something that but you wouldn't really need a master plan for 50 dwellings anyway. None of these sites might be in that category. It might be bigger than that. So, okay, and I think maybe actually a point I've got here is about when you look at 1 and 2 together, maybe it's actually about somehow combining these into an overall some way of wording these together and it's perhaps a more chronological approach. So the expectation is council produce an SPD. If that is not in place, then each individual the developers will be expected to produce master plans that ensure whatever the wording, comprehensive, if that's the word, or consistent, coherent strategy that doesn't prejudice the vision. Those sorts of words, I think.
That's exactly the point, Zed. Thank you.
So, C1 and 2, probably some kind of combined wording. Thank you. And I think actually I didn't ask a question about criterion 3, but again, I think criterion 3 just really follows the same sort of idea, doesn't it? It's getting to the same point about individual proposals contributing to the vision. So I think actually it's probably 1, 2, and 3 are all, and I suppose actually thinking about it,
You could keep going, Joe, I suspect,
yeah.
on that, but...
But 3 actually is the start, isn't it? It's about individual proposals contributing to the vision of the wider area via master plans or SPD. This is entirely possible by the time we're at 1 criteria, which is development must be good. So, something like that. That could be an entire local plan, frankly. So, I suppose the point, rationalisation of those 3 criteria. So criterion 4 at least is the tall buildings, and we've talked about that, and eventually, obviously when we get to D6, there might be some consequences of that, but this policy doesn't set any height figures, it just refers to that, so nothing on that for me. I didn't ask a question on criterion 4, but it did occur to me, because obviously there's nothing particularly about the principle of seeking development to address air quality matters. That's fine. It's not mentioned necessarily elsewhere, but I can probably accept that this might be something very specific. Like we were talking about yesterday, you've not mentioned air quality in the others, but that's probably because this has got a specific issue, so there's a logic to doing it here. The only wording that sort of made me raise my eyebrows a little bit was like, the internal planning of new development should position living and sleeping accommodation away from the most polluted side of the development, which most polluted side of the development almost implies that, well, actually then you're still putting development into polluted. Now, I know the whole of the borough is in an AQMA, but that, which obviously has implications for all schemes, I imagine, but that wording just like made me thought, oh, well, is it so bad here? Or there are parts of this which are so bad that you obviously would exclude development, and to sort of having a block, just imagine having some residential where the front of the house is, you know, in a, you know, there's no sleeping living accommodation there because it's in the most polluted, but the back of the house, you're okay. It just seemed a bit, oh, that's an odd.
I suspect that isn't the anticipated result. So there is one point that it would be sensible to add to our action list, and that's to deal with the overarching. You've asked this question before with regard to whether any of the sites have any particular air quality issues in comparison to any others, particularly on Cruse Hill. And it would be sensible, can I suggest, that we have on our action list a requirement to produce a note that deals specifically with New Southgate and with Cruse Hill, so that you have that before you. With regard to the specific question as to whether there are any differences between those two sites and any other part of the borough.
Yeah, that seems. I mean, I think here, because it is highlighted quite strongly here, isn't it, as being a very significant. And if you've got areas where you say the most polluted side of the development,
yeah.
Again, it sort of reads, that does read to me as obviously there is something there are areas you want to avoid entirely. I'm not sure that's the most appropriate form of words.
No, quite so. It's been judged as to whether or not this is an appropriate site for housing. So it would be.
I think probably with all these things, actually, if you're going to mention, it's probably just cross whichever, you know, your air quality policies and pollution policies. It would be more akin to just making sure development is accepted in regard to those, rather than this sort of slightly, you know, odd wording, because one would assume, again, sorry, my standard phrase, one would assume, then if an application comes in where, irrespective of, you know, that sort of point, is that it's either acceptable or it's not in air quality terms, and having this idea, well, it's okay if as long as the living accommodation's on the other side of the building, that seems to be, I don't know, almost prejudging something in a way, or implying that a degree of pollution's okay and acceptable. So I think it's unintended, I'm sure, but it's just the way it reads to me. So I think must positively address the main North Circular Road and mitigate against poor air quality and noise pollution associated with the heavy traffic route, obviously all fine. And then I guess take out the bit about internal planning, because that seems to be sort of not very helpful. And then housing design should encourage, and so on, which all seems, again, natural stuff, but again, some kind of cross-reference to the relevant AQMA policy or air quality policies. Okay, thank you. And move on then to, I did ask a question about criterion 6, and this was about the Explorer. I think it was the usual thing about the potential for creation of active routes will be explored, because it says potential will be explored. I wasn't entirely sure who was doing the exploring here. Is this something that the council's doing as part of his SPD master, overarching approach, and then we'll sort of put that in the SPD, and then developers will have regard to it? Or was it you're expecting developers to explore it? I think if it was the latter, then the wording would be slightly different, wouldn't it? Because it's not. I always think about, because these policies have got, sometimes they're a bit, this is what the council are going to do, and sometimes it's a bit DM, and sometimes it's a bit in the between. I read that as being, this is sort of part of the council's activity, and maybe implementing these active routes rather than necessarily a DM element. It's a subtle thing. I just want to clarify, and I think you've said. What your answer was to my question on that. It does say the council is actively exploring the creation of new active routes, so I think it is, it is the council doing it. So maybe the council will explore the creation of active routes, so then at least it's not getting mixed up with anything you're expecting developers to do.
Yes, thank you, sir. Yes, we'll do that.
You've already had my suspicions about wording like that anyway when it comes to DM, but anyway. It's not absolutely unsound, but I think it contextually might be in places. And then I think 7, 8 and 9 are all, no questions, they are all about, you know, again, I think there's sort of SIL or 106 contributions. I think, you know, without the caveat that would come at the front, there might be something there about, well, is it justified? But I think provided that caveat's there, then that probably reduces or removes any concern about that. And then I think, yeah, nothing else from me, because I think that most of all my comments are sort of sorted out by the we're relevant at the start. So any comments on the policy itself, Mr. Byrne?
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Just in regard to our representation, we mentioned that this area is identified as an opportunity area in the London plan, which I don't think is reflected in the policy itself, and that does lead into some a number of requirements set out for New Southgate opportunity area within the London plan, and I'm not sure that all of those have been particularly addressed. I think the London plan, I'm sorry, it seems a bit vague sometimes in the London plan whether this is required or not, but I think an opportunity area framework might be required for the area to identify, that could be, I guess, a master plan, but it is a bit unclear. It might not be. There's also issues, that also relates to issues around Crossrail 2, which I think will be about protecting areas of land should that happen, and what that might mean. And there's also then some specific requirements for, sorry, not requirements, comments about New Southgate opportunity area in the London plan to do with some quite significant changes to the road layouts. And again, yeah, they sort of seem quite, they're both big and vague. 2.1.38 of the London plan looks at considering the viability of some tunnelling, some sections of the North Circular, or decking over a small section of the North Circular because of the impact that has on the area, but also on, I think, developing the area comprehensively. So I wasn't sure that had really been sort of suitably reflected, if you like, in the policy. And also it's a very specific point about the being an opportunity area does, of course, actually also lead to specific requirements about car parking, as we saw the other day. So it might be also useful to mention it, just so people know that it is. I also think the council's done quite a bit of work funded by the GLA, as I understand it, to identify how it's going to try and hit the 2.5, or whether it can, whether it's feasible in any way to meet the 2,500 target set for this opportunity area. I think that's due to report soon, as I understand it. So it's more just a question about whether there might be some potential large windfall sites coming forward in terms of capacity, or what that might mean for the planning of the area. That was it for me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, the council can explain the relationship between its policy, London Plan Policy SD1, I believe, and what that means. And then, as you say, there are some references. There's always a reference in the table to 2,500 homes in New Southgate. This plan says 699. So, question, I suppose, is the difference there. But there may be logic for that. And then, yeah, these points about the as you said, the transport implications. I mean, it's a point I made the other day, I think it's where it gets big, because obviously the London plan is still part of the development plan, so the policies may apply, but if the policy is requiring the council to do something through its local plan, then that might be particularly important.
I think Part B of SD1 says through boroughs through development plans should. I think that's maybe where that comes in.
So boroughs through development plans should clearly set out how they're encouraged to deliver growth potential of the opportunity area. Council could argue that's what this policy is seeking to do. Support development, yes. Plan and provide for the necessary social and other infrastructure. Policy potentially refers to that. Recognise the role of heritage in placemaking. I don't know if that's relevant here. Establish capacity for growth in the opportunity area. Well, they've done that. You might argue it's not enough, but they've put a figure on it, or be it in the supporting text. Just so, again, from Mr. Hudson's point of view, because he's not been here, one of the questions I did ask about these policies is that none of them have numbers in them, and the question would be whether I should, the policy should include those numbers or not. Council thinks not, but I've obviously got to come to you on that. Support and sustain SIL. Well, I think that we've had council are definitely trying to do that through various things. Include ambitious transport mode share targets. That probably isn't reflected in the policy as it stands. And support wider regeneration to ensure that development proposals integrate into the surrounding area. And I guess I would think that between all the criteria, it probably does that, at least seeks to ensure that planning frameworks are informed by public. I don't know. I suppose the question is, what is a planning framework? You're right. That is a question, because that's a made-up term, if you like. There isn't, so could it be SPD? It probably could, I'm guessing. Take appropriate measures to deal with contamination. No, I mean, I would say, and just on first reading of that, is that not everything I would say in that needs, I would say, as a planner, that not everything that's listed there needs to be in the new Southgate policy. I'd say, well, as the plan as a whole does that, then some of that is probably addressed, because they are some generic things, but there are also some very specific things that I probably would expect the new Southgate policy to reflect. So obviously, sorry, it was useful for me just to go through that, at least I understand. So if the council, if there's anything the council wants to come back on, I mean, it is a fair point actually, just generally, notwithstanding the opportunity area point, parking. Again, it's one of these internal consistency things. Parking's been mentioned in most of these policies, not in this one, as it happens, whether that's just a general point. But again, I suppose one thing is the capacity as well. I mean, 699 versus 2,500. There's probably a very good reason for that, and I'm sure there's, it's understand sort of when you delve into the figures, but just explain that to me be helpful.
Yes, so in terms of the numbers, in terms of the specific numbers, those will be, I imagine, dealt with by Mr. Kennedy, but obviously the opportunities that are available for the delivery of housing generally within New Southgate have been considered through the HELAR process, the call for sites process, and the councils can only do as much as it has available to it by way of the tools. I mean,
Sorry, Mr. Richard. What I don't know, I suppose, is about how the 2,500 that's listed in that table was identified. It might have been a best guess at the time, or or what evidence there at the time, and obviously the logic being that the district plans, borough plans, would then drill down and may well obviously come to a different conclusion.
Yes, quite. But Ms. Hope, I think, is going to deal with some matters relating to that first, and then Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Mr. Burns refers to the opportunity area planning framework, and that's set out within the London plan itself. So that OAPF is covering Enfield, Barnet, and also Haringey as well. So it's the 2,000 number, probably just diced off through the London plan. The intention of an OAPF is to is a supplementary planning document at the end through existing London plan. So the policy itself acknowledges that we do work together with Barnet and also Haringey as well. It's also not, we've included a reference within the policy working with Barnet due to its cross-boundary nature relationship. But it's not prescriptive in a way that is signalling that the council has to, align with everything in Barnet. So, and the matter statement does explain that as well. I think there was another point on parking as well. So the policy itself, can cross-reference to other policies within the plan, for example T1, T2 and T3, which is also aligning with the London plan. I don't know if Mr Kennedy wants to provide any additional information on capacities.
Yeah. Thank you. So I guess we've just, in terms of the capacities we've allocated in this plan, we've taken that approach that we've taken for all the other set allocations that we've discussed previously. In terms of the capacity in this site, I think, yeah, I think Ms Hope's already mentioned that there's the 2,500 is looking across borough, and we're just looking at this site. I think we have looked as a council working with other councils, Barnet and Haringey, in collaboration with the GLA at the potential of this of the wider area. So we did a cross-borough piece of work just to look at, you know, what is the capacity of this area, which does go slightly beyond what we've put in the plan. It is also much more of a speculative piece of work, hasn't gone through the same process and could inform, you know, in development going forward. And actually, it has been set up to become a design code for the area, potentially adoptable into an SPD if so desired. I think one of the things identified in that piece of work was the challenges of Crossrail 2. So just for your reassurance, sir, the Crossrail 2 safeguarding area is annotated on the policies map. So just on this figure, it essentially is along the western edge of the boundary of the placemaking area and the borough boundary. So there's a requirement to engage with TfL before any developments proposed there, and obviously most likely wouldn't be allowed there because they need it for building the new railway if it ever happens. I guess in the context of Crossrail 2, that was paused in 2020 during COVID, and at this stage we are not aware of any plans to progress that, so it's currently just safeguarded at the minute, which I guess does leave us in an interesting position in terms of the true capacity of these sites. In terms of the London plan as well, obviously there's a new London plan being created, and there's consultation out, and the GLA is looking at reviewing the status of this opportunity area.
I think just to add, just looking at the new London plan that's under consultation, the new Southgate opportunity area has been removed from that draft. So the council's very the council still wants the new Southgate area recognised within the London plan and has been lobbying the GLA on this, but there's still mechanisms within our policy itself to work closely with Barnet to bring forward a joint SPD or master plan in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just on the, there's a couple of points actually. One thing, thank you, because you reminded me, a point I did want to make, I lost it in discussions of criteria 1 to 3 needing to be revisited and revised, but there is, and obviously I did raise it in the questions, is this actual particular reference to proposals should also consider consistency with the Barnet's local plan policy GSS 09, and I asked a question about that, and you, in your response, you referred to what is referred to, you referred to the elements in the supporting text, but not in the policy. You may wish to, I mean, but clearly a policy in your plan can't refer to somebody else's local plan or suggest that they have to be in accordance with somebody else's local plan. So that reference would have to come out of the policy. Clearly, yeah, I mean, you can't be determining planning applications in Enfield based on Barnet's policies. However, those 3 criteria are combined and rejigged, that reference needs to come out. I mean, obviously the supporting text can reflect on the fact that there are potential cross-boundary issues and cross-boundary work and so on and so forth. But obviously the policy can't impose any restriction. So thank you because you've all reminded me about that point. And then secondly, so the Crossrail to safeguarding area is in the policies map. I've not picked up so far any policy about that in the plan. Obviously I've read the plan cover to cover, but not necessarily all recently. So I don't know if there is a policy in this plan about that. I guess if you've got it on your policies map, then there needs to be something somewhere. And maybe this is a logical place to put it if it only refers to New Southgate, even if it's a cross-reference back to the London plan or whatever. But I think it needs to reflect that. You can't really. It's not whether you can or can't. I don't think it's necessarily effective to have something on the policies map with no policy related to it. So Crossrail does need to be added there, and I think it seems like it's logical to add it here. And again, even if you want to qualify that in your supporting text, say, well, that's the policy as it is now, and that's in the London Plan, but it's being reviewed, and that might obviously have an effect later on. But I think it is current policy. So yeah. And then these points about the North Circular that are referred to, albeit in supporting text in the London Plan, not in policy. And again, I don't know whether it's absolutely necessary for this new Southgate policy to refer to those, because they seem like they would be things which the council or TfL would be delivering, not necessarily. They are, I guess, in the class of the council will be doing this, but not necessarily a sort of decision making, unless they have some bearing on decisions because of safeguarding land, which I don't know. So I'm not. I'll take that away with me, I think, and I'll probably review SD1 at my leisure again and just come back. But I think London Plan SD1 to see if there's anything that's really. But I think on the face of it, I think you referred to when it comes to parking about cross-references T1 to 3, which is yes, but most of your other PL policies have something about. Some of them have specific references to how you're going to deal with parking. So I think it probably is relevant to. There is something that relates back to the London Plan here, to have that approach set out, but at least it also sets the context for in the SA policies about what you're going to seek to achieve. So I think that's fair enough. I think the Crossrail 2 probably does need mention, if not here, somewhere else. And then I think look on a very cursory look, it looks like most of the other issues are probably covered in the broad terms, I would say. And if we accept that the SPD and across boundary work is akin to planning framework, I might again just to be clear, I think maybe the supporting text could be highlighting the links between this policy and the London Plan and how it meets the London Plan policy, so it's all clear and that linkage is clear. So I would say do that. And thank you for clarifying the capacity. That makes sense. Thank you. Any other points from anyone? No, thank you. All right. Okay. So we'll go on to the allocations, and so we'll start with 7.3 Ladderswood Estate. Then, if that's is that okay? So then, at least you can go if you want to. So, yeah, this is an estate regeneration proposal which seems to have quite a lot of history to it. It allocated for new homes and open space and sort of, again, undefined social community infrastructure and other flexible non-residential floor space. There's a lot of these land use requirements like to keep your options open. We've talked about the numbers needing to go in there where they're known. There is a figure of 1,500 square metres of Class E, although I'm not sure all of it's supposed to be Class E. It might be helpful if the council just bring me up to date with a bit of the history on this and where things are, status and so on, before I can set some context.
So New Ladderswood Estate has been in progress since 2014, quite early on. It's based in the new Southgate ward. It's an estate regeneration scheme to deliver new homes, supporting infrastructure in terms of open space and social community uses, and also other non-flexible, non-residential uses, so in a small-scale kind of manner, like a cafe. Mixed-use development includes an 80-bed hotel with 149 affordable housing units, community centre and community uses. Number of homes is around 107. The scheme kind of started in the first plan period, so in the first phase of the plan period, so 0 to 5. It's in single ownership at the moment. The planning agent is here, and relevant planning history. There was demolition of the existing buildings in 2014. The planning permission itself is split into 6 phases, with phase 1 completed in 2017, first occupation in 2017. With phase 2 completed in March 2020, phase 3 completed in November 2020, and then phase 4 just last year, November 2024. So the remaining phases are phases 5 and 6 at the moment.
Thank you. And so the 107 that's in the policy, sorry, it's in the table. Is that what's left then to be built out? Just to be clear, or is that the overarching scheme?
Yes, sir, I believe so. The remainder of the master plan. Yep. Which, as currently designed and permitted, is the kind of lower rise part of the scheme.
So that would be, so that's phases 5 to 6 then. Okay. So, Mr. Hudson might be able to help me with this, but you would, so they're down as years 0 to 5. Clearly, that we know now that's not the case. So, but they are presumably going to be classed as 5-year supply. Yeah. Okay. I will say, I think from the reps and from the statements, the site promoter, maybe this is a time to bring Mr. Hudson now, so we talk about the general principles and things before we get into the nitty-gritty, if there is anything to get into. I think you've put some warnings in place about viability and delivery, so I don't know if there's anything you want to raise now about principles before we get into the criteria.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Just probably to add in general what has already been confirmed by the council. So yes, phases 5 and 6 remain to be developed by the LLP, which is combined partnership between Sherry Green Homes, Mullally Construction and Riverside Housing. And as the council said, it's been ongoing development for a number of years now, nearly 10 years. The LLP has been in high-level discussions with the council's placemaking, regeneration team, and planning team about identification of the latter phases and further opportunities to provide additional homes. So nothing formal has come forward yet in terms of either a pre-app or a planning application. So that will come in due course. From my understanding, the site is not in a single ownership. It's under the control of, I believe, the council and the GLA. And as the phases go forward, they then revert and hand it over to the LLP. So the process at the moment is the LLP needs to get approval from the council's placemaking team in order to proceed to a future planning application for any increased in densities. Obviously, sir, we've provided you with a written statement dated May, which gives you further details of this. And as part of that, the LLP is requesting greater flexibility in terms of land uses associated with other forms of residential, which are supported by the London Plan, and namely build-to-rent, co-living and purpose-built student accommodation tenures, to be considered to assist in the further ongoing regeneration of New Ladderswood. I think that covers everything in terms of background. Obviously, that greater flexibility, and as noted in the written statement, also around tall buildings, further aids the ongoing viability of delivery of the estate. So the capacity quoted, yes, that's correct in terms of the extant planning permission, we have requested that capacity be referred to as a minimum, and that any future planning application that comes forward is encouraged to exceed that capacity, obviously subject to further detailed design and planning application procedures.
So, yeah, thank you. Just in terms of the overall policy, both PL, I guess, well, you know, plans read as a whole, so the housing policies, generally PL7, forgive me, sometimes I start referring to other PLs, PL7 and 7.3 together, do they preclude other forms of housing? I mean, it just says new homes, it doesn't say market or affordable, so does it, I suppose the first question is it that you think that the policies preclude that at the moment, or that it's you want it to be overtly, you think it should be overtly set out, that it doesn't have to be?
Correct.
It opens up the possibility of specialist forms of accommodation.
Yeah, often so when I find a planning policy refers to new homes, with no disrespect to boroughs or councillors or objectors, they assume that refers to standard C3 residential. Obviously, the London plan now refers to there's a numerous alternative types of supporting residential, of those that I've already mentioned. So I think from the LLP's point of view, it would be very helpful if the policy could refer to other forms of housing.
Okay, and just to be absolutely clear, obviously I've read your statement, but the if it was if it said a minimum of 107, you'd be content with that, rather than putting a necessarily a higher figure on it. It would give you the flexibility that you require.
Yes, sir, thank you. That is correct. I mean, as it's early days and the discussions with the council about the quantum that could be delivered on phases 5 and 6 are not yet known. I haven't provided an exact figure. We've indicated that densities could potentially double, again, subject to detailed design and further discussions with the borough. So if it was referred to as a minimum and or a reference to or any future planning application that will need to go through detailed design process and approvals, the LLP would be fully supportive.
Okay, thank you. Well, when we get onto the word, we get onto the criteria, because I know you mentioned tall buildings, and just double checking, there's no, this is one that doesn't refer to tall buildings, I think, does it? Oh, sorry, tall buildings are not considered appropriate on this site, so we can cover that when we get to it. It won't surprise you to learn, maybe, from over the last couple of days, we've been talking, the issue of whether it should be minima on some of these has come up already, so it has been something we've discussed. This is one I note where, what is, just to bring it over the discussions, my understanding is that what is policy in these tables is the land use requirement row, the design principles and the infrastructure requirements, their policy, everything else is akin, supporting text. So I have suggested, I think, pretty much throughout, that the land use requirements, at least if we're known, should put a figure in it. So it should say what the number is, because that becomes policy. And of course it does relate back then to H. There's an H policy got the numbers in it anyway as well, so there's obviously a link there. How it is to be, I suppose, to be determined how those numbers are referred to as, because sometimes in these tables it says approximate, sometimes it says nothing, like now it just says new homes, and so they say approximate and puts a number in, so it's a bit of a mixed bag of approaches. The general term is obviously approximate estimated capacity, which I think we've agreed is probably edging the bets a bit too much. So yeah, there's a discussion there to be had. I mean, I think, well, I see what the council's view is about saying minimum on some of these things. Sometimes minimum will be fine, no doubt. Sometimes it might not be, because you might have an upper limit. It might say up to, and it might be contextual in that respect. But we've also talked about the difficulty sometimes in identifying a capacity on some of these brownfield sites, because it is obviously dependent on what comes forward. And I guess the point would be as well, what would the council's objection be to more coming forward if it met all the other requirements? And I'm assuming it wouldn't have any objection if it met all the other requirements. So anyway, not wanting to put words in the council's mouth, but I think that's sort of the way that discussions have been going.
Yeah, so it in part depends on the degree of sensitivity that exists in respect of the site. Mr. Kennedy can deal, I think, with some aspects of the site itself, but it's worth noting that there are obviously other representations in respect of the plan suggesting that there is a degree of sensitivity around this area, such that it may be appropriate in those circumstances to stick with the approximation description rather than a minimum. But I don't know whether Mr. Kennedy can add anything further on that.
Thank you, sir. Yes, so we, the Planning Service has received information and some proposals from the developer, and I think obviously there's always going to be a discussion around that and the detail, and potentially a meeting in the middle, or the usual way of the negotiations. However, I think we could entertain a higher number than that, and a minimum could be acceptable in terms of optimising that site. Obviously, I don't think we can agree to any uprated figure at this stage, but yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, it's all about, again, sorry, it's about, let's have a planning discussion. I suppose it's about the inherent risks, I suppose. If you say minimum, that could imply if somebody comes in with something which is 10 times the minimum, then, but obviously there's always a subject to, you know, and it shouldn't be seen as a minimum shouldn't necessarily be seen as there's no maximum. You should always be subject to the normal tests. Similarly, if you say approximate, and you say, well, approximate means that it gives you some flexibility, but then if you say approximately 107, somebody comes in with 200, then there's going to be a big debate, no doubt, at your committee about is that approximate, even if it well, you can say, well, it still meets all of the criteria, it's except form development, but so approximate is one of those awkward sort of phrases that is in plans, it is there, and there's obviously sometimes good reason for it, because you don't want to be absolutely rigid, and they say sometimes if there are particularly sensitive sites, it might be up to or a maximum of, because you know exactly, you know that going beyond a certain number would be unacceptable. So okay, I'll bear all that in mind. I think and it may be that we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach to these allocations. It's just what is appropriate for each one. Sometimes it might be a problem.
If I could just add as well, sir. Obviously, this when we drafted the plan, we only had the outline at that stage, which is it's an older application, and times have moved on in London and densities discussions in Enfield. And similarly, we have a few other estate regeneration projects across the borough, which we'll come to in Matter 7. And so I think having this, like many other of the developers who've come to us with potential increases in density, we've taken the opportunity to reflect on what we've had in there and where that came from. And in some cases, we can see that there is the opportunity for further optimisation of a site.
Okay, right, thank you. I mean, whether or not, I'm if the council feels that it can put a number, a minimum, increase the number, and so this number again to take it back to the very harsh soundness issues of this 107 isn't justified and therefore, or indeed positively prepared, and so the council will be content to increase that number even if it's still a minimum. Then you can put that to me. I would suggest that would be an action if you want to leave it, but if it's because obviously there is an action to amend that land use requirement anyway to reflect some kind of number. So if in doing that you wish to suggest a different number, and then obviously there'll be I can consider that and see whether that goes through to consultation. Then comments can be made on the main mods. But I've heard what you've had to say about it's the flexibility there and. Yeah, I think obviously again just generally not losing sight of the fact there are sensitivities, but hopefully when we look at the criteria next, those will provide enough comfort that those sensitivities can be addressed. So, if not here, then in the plans also. So if there's no more on the sort of general principles, I'll just go through my comments such as they are on the criteria. Again, Ms Hudson, you've probably not heard a lot of this discussion. So things like, I'm not going to say a great deal about the infrastructure requirements because mostly my comments have already been made about that, and it's generally, obviously, somewhere in the plan it needs to be made clear, like we did in PL, it needs to be clear that these are all subject to normal sort of SIL requirements, but whether we have to put that in every single policy, and I'm still thinking about how best to deal with that, but clearly there could be some concern from people saying, well, hold on a minute, why are we contributing to that? It's dependent on SIL regs, and I think everyone, but, rather than making that clear every time, there's no, so that sort of thing. So I really got, and then there's sort of, council has put forward modifications to most of these infrastructure requirements in relation to sort of TfL's comments and sometimes historic English. So I'm not going through those every single time. We know where we are with those, and it may be that they need tweaking in time, and that wording can be agreed. Having said that, let me just get to the new Ladderswood estate. So, for example, TfL's referring here, or the TfL change to criterion 2, so should contribute towards, I mean, I suppose it could be could, because the other way of change at least to could, but anyway, should contribute towards TfL upgrades to the London Underground network, serving Arnos Green, and then you've got this extra stuff about this includes funding for station access improvements, such as blah, 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 blah. And again, I'd probably say that's not necessary because, the policy is about requirements. How they're spent is up to TfL when they get their money, I suppose. You can justify it. So, but anyway. So nothing for me, I don't think, on the infrastructure requirements other than standard issues. Again, all A to G are, I'm not thinking the sort of placemaking issues. Not any comments in particular on those. H obviously is the I probably do have a comment here because this is one of those where G, it's not H. G says that tall buildings are not considered appropriate in this site, and I think your regulation 22 comment, the comments in the reg 22 statement on that say something along the lines of you'd be prepared to consider revising the wording, but I don't think anything's been put to me, so I don't know what the council's position on tall buildings is here. Just let me, in the reg 22 statement, let me just find that reference, make sure I'm not mistaken. On the top, it's the top of page B388. There's so many versions of the PDF, I can't guarantee that I could give you the PDF number. So B388, Ladderswood Estate comments, and it say, obviously these are comments which talk about tall buildings, and the last bit says, this is the council's response. Principles for site allocation, SA7.3, the Enfield local plan's design and character evidence-based supports a design-led approach that responds to the local context and character. Flexibility in building heights can facilitate innovative design solutions and ensure that sites' deliverability while maintaining sensitivity to surrounding areas, all of which sounds very sensible. Therefore, the council will consider revising the policy wording to incorporate flexibility for building heights, ensuring the local plan remains effective and adaptable. So you said you would consider that. That isn't necessarily saying you would revise it so it includes tall buildings, but it does sort of suggest some softening of the approach. So I don't know what say if the council's got a view on the whether what its view is on tall buildings here now, whether it's changed or not.
So I think Ms Hope can deal with that.
Mr Kennedy was all that.
Delegated. Thank you, sir. In terms of tall buildings in this area, as you know, we've taken an evidence-based approach through the character of growth study, which one of the appendixes of which deals with New Southgate. In our considerations for this site, given its cross-borough nature, there are limited heritage impacts in New Southgate itself, apart from Arnos Grove Station, which we'll get to. But there is a Grade 2 listed building in Barnet just across the border, Friarn Hospital. and through that work we identified potential harm to the setting of that building. It might be something we want to pick up at the next stage of hearings, just because it will affect multiple sites and multiple areas that aren't necessarily covered by the site allocation. But in terms of this site, it was assessed that any height of this particular development would potentially cause harm to that setting, which was why the heights in this area have been drawn as they are. There is a unique topography to this site, so as you go down towards the North Circular, not this site in particular, but the entire placemaking area, as you go towards the North Circular, it's kind of like in a valley, so to speak. So there is the potential for height as we go closer to the North Circular, but as you rise up towards the station, that potential reduces. As well as that, obviously the existing outline permission already established a massing height and character which was deemed acceptable. In terms of the softening of the policy, we are required by the London Plan to mark where buildings would be appropriate, and that also means that buildings aren't appropriate if they aren't in those locations.
That's fine. I was just going what the Reg 22 statement said. That was also so Appendix D then doesn't identify this area as broadly as a location suitable for tall buildings. It's clear in that regard.
It shows where they are acceptable. There are areas in this area which are acceptable,
Okay,
but not this particular
not
site
this one.
allocation,
Okay.
or this part of the site allocation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure Mr. Thompson will come out of that. I'll just finish off my points before inviting comment, and then where are we? Yeah. We've got this now standard parking discussion. So I'll just cover that off here because it's got the limited parking in the submitted plan, and then the proposed modification to make it clear that it's car-free in line with PTEL 5 and 6. Well, that again, it seems there's a it's not one of those situations on the face of it where you're wanting to go beyond the London Plan standards, and so therefore needs to be clear. I think here, if it's already PTEL 5, then that is car-free, recognising that nothing's ever completely car-free. And then you've got the points about practical stuff. So this is last line. Any parking provided must be strictly limited to returning residents with an existing car as part of the estate regeneration scheme. So I suppose that's similar to what we were talking about yesterday, and is it this bespoke approach, because it's estate regeneration, there's already residents who've got access, presumably a right, so it's like inverted commas, a right to a car, or at least have got that expectation. So actually that might be the wording, because sometimes it wasn't entirely clear from those other estate regeneration schemes. So this sort of wording, albeit maybe tweaked, is the approach.
Yes, sir. I think it really depends on the project, though. So where a site is already underway, such as this one, and there's already an agreement with residents and policies in place, we might need to do that bespoke approach. However, there are potentially other sites which haven't got to that stage, haven't engaged residents, where we might not want to take this particular bespoke approach, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, I suppose the overarching thing is, and then the council reviewing all of these things and making sure, because my concern here is not, well, I've obviously got concern that they're justified, and generally speaking, some of these things do sound justified, but what my concern is making sure that the policy is effective for the council to get what it's expecting, and that's sometimes I think it's a slight mismatch with some of the wording that's coming out and what the council want to achieve. So I'm sort of trying to make sure, I guess, that you're getting what you want, and there's no unintended consequence of a certain form of wording. So it's probably why I'm labouring this a bit. And if it is literally, well, not every site, but there's a different approach, fine, provided it's clear, and if some things are. So I guess in a situation where, I mean, you could, TfL might argue, for example, that this wording, although they've sort of agreed it, but just for the sake of argument, they might say, well, hold on a minute, it's PTEL 5 and 6, it shouldn't matter what existing residents have got it's car free. So, so for me, it'd be like, well, okay, from a justification perspective, is it justified you diverging slightly from the London plan? And it might, well, yeah, because there's a history here which justifies that, and it's reflecting that. In other places, it might not be. So yeah, there's lots of subtleties on this score. And to be fair, parking has come up much more in this plan than any other plan that I've ever examined or written. So it is coming up quite a lot. It's very interesting actually how many different ways there are of dealing with parking across the piece. Okay, thank you for that. I think that's. We've got, there's a couple of, again, general points that have come up before, but I don't know, there's nothing about, again, you could argue you don't need to because the plan covers it as a whole, but again, other policies do it, so if you're doing it in others, why not here? But reference to effects on living conditions of existing residents, particularly state regeneration, you presumably got existing residents, so development shouldn't obviously impede them. There is nothing, because as you've said, there's nothing in the RAG rating about heritage, and perhaps it's because you've designed the policy in such a way that the density and everything is designed to avoid harm to heritage assets. But if there are heritage assets, albeit in Barnet, it might be worth flagging that up, particularly if people are pushing at the door of height, then you maybe want to refer to heritage specifically.
Yes, certainly, sir. I think that would be helpful.
And here, because you've got a specific building, it's more than just a generic protect heritage. You can at least make it clear what building you're talking about, albeit being in a neighbouring authority. So heritage action. And I think I've said anything about flooding, but it is flood zone 1, is that right? Or is this one of, assume not. But again, you can pick that up in your consistency review.
Yes, it is flood zone 1.
It is flood zone, yeah. And then this final thing is there's nothing in this, I think I'm right in saying there's nothing in the policy, the infrastructure requirements or design principles about the siting of the non-residential uses that are sort of identified. Obviously, there's not a lot about what those non-residential uses are. I guess you're maintaining a degree of flexibility, okay. It's about complementing, I guess, the housing. But and again, I'm not saying that it's absolutely necessary to have something about citing it, but it's whether there is something the council thinks it is important to be clear about where you expect that to be cited. And I picked that up because in other policies you have been clear. So if it's a case of no, you're entirely flexible, no reason to say it, fine. But if there's something you want, then the policy should say it.
Thank you, sir. We'll take that away, but from recollection, there's nothing standing out.
Okay, thanks. That's me done then. So, Mr. Hudson, thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, just in reference, in particular, to paragraph G and the tall building element, and obviously certainly take on board the council's comments, and that was part of the high-level feedback we've had during discussions with numerous officers. I appreciate the council may not have seen the work that has been done behind the scenes, but the design team has reviewed views from that Grade 2 listed hospital in Barnet and has established that there could be some tall buildings which wouldn't have an impact on the listing or the significance of that building, and still allow a form of a tall building on this site. Obviously, that will be subject to full detailed design and scrutiny with the borough. Again, I appreciate this is not in the public domain. It hasn't been submitted as part of our reps. I'm more than happy to submit a version of this if Sir wishes to see it. It would be subject to future discussions and pre-app discussions. So the idea is that I don't think it should be ruled out entirely because just because there is a concern about that view from the hospital when it could be clearly tested and demonstrated. Also to note that the definition of a tall building in the local plan is 7 stories. And that, again, that's not mirroring up with the London plan of 10 stories. So if we were to come in at 7 stories, then for any densification on this site would be identified as a tall building and therefore not appropriate. So I think there just needs to be greater flexibility around this site allocation to allow intensification, densification, whilst having regards to its impact on the listed building as noted. And if that could be fully demonstrated, no harm, and happens to allow for a tall building, then I think that should be acceptable.
Thanks. Yeah, obviously we're going to have a discussion in what I'm calling stage 3 about policy DE6, which is obviously tall buildings or tall buildings more generally. I know that the definition of tall building, I think GLA have raised some concerns about. I don't know if they've been agreed because it's obviously very of those things have been sorted. That's an issue come up. Appendix D, which sets out the areas where tall buildings are, that's obviously going to be discussed. It may be that obviously people who've got specific issues around individual allocation may wish to come to that and contribute to that debate. It is interesting. I would say I've been having a little musing out loud, thinking out loud about the London plan, because it does obviously. I did say to somebody yesterday, the councils sort of, to an extent had their hands tied because the London plan says you must identify areas where they are acceptable and by definition where they're not acceptable and maximum heights, thus potentially limiting the council's ability to assess the effect of individual schemes that come in. And I think the DE6 does have something about caveats, doesn't it? I think about where there may be opportunities. I know GLA have objected to that, so we will get onto that. It seems basic town planning. You assess the harm of effect of development when an application comes in, and don't prejudge it, which just seems to be prejudging it. Which I may have views on that, but if that's what the London plan says, that's what the London plan says. So I'll take your point. But obviously, the council can respond to what you said. Actually, sorry, and the other thing that the council could respond to, Ms Sutton's points about the non-C3 uses as well. I didn't get an answer to that, probably because I was going off on one myself. Yeah, just perhaps respond to that point as well as the tall buildings point.
Thank you, sir. Yes, on the tall building point, you said it, we have to define these areas, which does tie our hands to an extent, and maybe that discussion on the size of that area might be better served in the discussions around DE6 when we're getting into the methodology in that particular, looking at this site as a whole, which is partially defined by that setting of that historic building, and obviously where we have allocated height in this placemaking area, there would be a requirement for that testing to happen through the planning process. On the definition of what is a tall building, which we're also required to define locally in Enfield. So the London plan does set a kind of floor so that boroughs don't, it sets a minimum definition, I guess, so that a lot of boroughs don't just say it's a 2-storey semi-detached house. But that is roughly, we've interpreted that as roughly around 21 metres. So it's in the London plan it says 6 stories or 18 metres measured from the ground to the floor level, the uppermost story. So it's not 10 stories. It's about 6 to 7, depending on how you measure it. 21 metres roughly. It should be noted actually that we have defined the area just to the south, the actual existing part of Ladderswood, as a higher threshold just because of its scale of development. One of the few parts of the borough.
I mean, you say so. I mean, it's helpful to have these points raised during the site-specific discussions, so at least I'm aware of, and it sets the context for some of these. Whichever way around you do it, it sets the context for this wider discussion. DE6. I mean, it's not, and this might be more of a DE6 point. I guess we might get into, but it's not. There are areas where you have allocated sites and said, tall buildings will be acceptable up to this level where there are heritage assets and where there's potential for harm. Because I think in some places you've almost accepted there will be some degree of harm, and presumably tacitly considering that, well, at least in principle, there's the potential for the harm to be outweighed by the public benefits. So it's not unheard of for the plan to, not everywhere you've accepted tall buildings, there are heritage assets, and I guess you've done some kind of, the actual testing and the application comes in, but you're reasonably certain that the level of harm you're likely to get is going to be outweighed by the benefit. And obviously, then somebody comes in with something wholly unacceptable, then you've still got the tools to manage it. So I guess the question here would be, why isn't that the case here? Albeit you might have said, well, you don't, I mean, again, sorry, I'm putting your words in your mouth, but I was just thinking of the logic would be, well, actually don't think the benefits would outweigh the potential harm there of the dwellings that you could get, or it's a product of where you've drawn the line on Appendix D and that's it. So maybe the Appendix D, we can look at that, see whether, particularly if there are areas which are quite close to this. But anyway, yeah, so, but thank you for that. And then on the, say, what the council's view on, what should we call them, non-see-through or specialist forms of residential would be here.
Well, so the use of the identification of a specific type of housing as opposed to general C3 would be something that delineates or separates out this site from all the other allocations when there's been no such indication that would be appropriate. And that alone would be suggestive of not taking the approach of taking a specific approach for this site. And again, in any event, it can be taken into account as part of the process of analysing the planning application.
Okay, thank you. Any other points on 7.3 before I move on? No? Thank you very much. I don't know if you, obviously, Mr. Dutton, you're more than welcome to stay, but if you want to leave, you can. But if you are leaving, thank you for your help this morning. So we'll go back then to 7.1. We'll start at the beginning, the gas holder site. So we are within within the setting of a Grade 2 star listed building, and just apropos of nothing, the heights. You can have a 33 metre building within the setting of this Grade 2 listed building, but never mind. It was probably good. Yeah, I'm sure there's a good reason. You'll be justifying that momentarily. So we've got a proposal for 182. Sorry. Just things occurred to me. On the last site, obviously, and again, it doesn't really alter anything. But if it was, it's estate regeneration, but it's not is it not redevelopment? Because obviously, some of the estate regeneration seems it's about the numbers have been a net increase. But that's because obviously there's been some redevelopment and some will be replaced. But in here, is it? Oh, this is not necessarily. Is that some of that? Basically, I think just be clear: is it a net increase and what the gross is? But if it's sort of on infill or something, it doesn't really matter.
Yes, sir. So it is a net increase. It takes into account the capacity of the site, existing homes on the estate before the regeneration began, and the number of homes that have been built out.
So I think just making all that very clear. What's in the trajectory versus what might be granted. Yeah. But anyway, sorry. That's again we talked about that before. So anyway, yes, the former gas hold site, new 182 dwellings. Again, this is identified on the basis of an extant planning permission. That's probably why there's good reason for some of the criteria. And then 371 square metres of unclear non-residential. So perhaps you could explain what the current status is of the permissions and timing and so on and so forth.
Thank you, sir. So this is a long-standing application which has been extant for some time. It was decided on appeal and has been subject to the same issues around viability, second staircase, etc. It has had that non-material amendment approved, so it's now, to our knowledge, compliant with the needs of the building regs, and conditions are being discharged to implement the scheme. There's hoarding around the site as well, so we can assume it's underway to some degree. In terms of the non-residential use, that's captured in the planning application. It's a small cafe on the fronting square, which on the inset map you can see is marked by the by the yellow blob.
Okay, thank you. So you would expect to be, there's no impediment to it coming forward now, so is this a 5-year supply site then? There's no reason why it
As
shouldn't.
far as we understand it. So we'll have to move it to the 5 to 10.
Yeah, go on. Okay. Thank you. Just open this. Keeps closing annoyingly. On the so we've got infrastructure requirements here, which again I assume are then probably taken from the permissions. So there'll be some specific things there. You have put forward a couple of mods relating to usual things about transport. And I think on the first one it is about, there's a thing about the rapid transit. It's more of a, I think it's definitional. It's not rapid transport. I think they obviously wanted something changing to refer to express bus route, which is fine. And then we've just talked about same wording on 2 about the installation of lifts and so on. So I'm not sure how much that is needed, but as long as the basic premise is about improvements to public transport. And you've got this reference in this one about the Environment Agency and contamination. A little bit, I mean, yeah, it again reads like an advisory, but it probably is policy actually, maybe, I don't know, because it's about making sure the site is, contamination is fully mitigated, I think, isn't it? So, kind of goes without saying, because there's legislation that deals with that, but if you've got it there, at least make it policy, not advisory. And indeed, if there's obviously if you've got a policy, whichever policy is on contamination and pollution, it might be a cross-reference to that as well. Right. So then that's all I've got to say on that. You've got in criterion A. And it might well just be because of the history and everything else, but you're strongly encouraged to be designed and delivered in conjunction with directly adjacent site, including enabling connections with the adjacent site, SA7.2.
Excuse me, sir. Are we looking? I think we're looking at.
7.1.
Maybe looking at the wrong table.
Am I? I'm looking at 7.1.
I thought we were talking about Honors Grove.
No, sorry.
Oh.
I've gone back to 7.1.
Oh, my mistake. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Got
Sorry.
mixed
Was
up
that not
there.
clear? I thought. Wait. Hey. I did say. I thought I'd said it. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Sorry,
Yeah,
my mistake.
Yeah. Is that 7.4? Yeah. Well, yeah. We've not. Yeah. I said we'd go back to the start and say 7.1. Yeah. Anyway, so you can catch up now. So yeah, it's just the point on contamination.
We might need to give you revise our update then on 7.1.
Oh, sorry. I would say the
Yeah,
permission.
so we were just talking about completely different.
Oh,
stuff
right.
there.
Sorry, because it's just say it's got permission. So yeah, and on peel. All right. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So on the gas holder site, SA 7.1, so we have, so resolution to grant was granted in 2021, December. However, this site has been affected by economic conditions, meaning that the applicant has withdrawn the application before the final permission could be granted and Section 106 agreed. That was done in July 24. So, and there's been no non-material amendment to address the second staircase issue for this site. So as far as we understand, it's not coming forward.
So then, you had the 182 within the 0 to 5 years. So is that where are we standing at then? Is it 10 plus now?
10 plus, yeah.
I'm going to assume it was in because you've got a permission or an
Correct.
extent, or so the fact that it is a gas holder with potentially very significant issues associated with it, does it actually mean it's is it a suitable site anyway? Is it so unlikely now that there's no permission in place or no certainty that it would actually drop out of the trajectory at all? Because obviously these are not straightforward sites to deliver, albeit you've had some interest.
I don't believe so, sir. I mean, for us, we'd be quite comfortable to keep that in the trajectory, but obviously 10 years plus, having had the confidence that it has received planning permission previously.
Okay, fine. Right, so now we know what we're talking about. And yeah, I did say we'd go into the gas holder. So criterion, so the same, I'm not going to go into the infrastructure requirements. Oh, just you can actually, well, I suppose the 371 square metres of non-residential was related to the permission. So I guess that's sort of, again, you're not necessarily requiring the non-residential floor space on this site if you don't really know what's happening. You know, it's reflecting a permission, but it's not like you will if somebody comes forward with a revised scheme, are you saying you want to see non-residential here, or is it just, well, if it comes forward, that's fine?
Thank you, sir. Just in terms of this particular site, there are locations, there's a small portion of the site that's within flood risk zone 2. So I think we were trying to ensure that none of the residential was in that portion. So we'd identified an exclusion zone.
Okay, all right, understood. Right, so then, criterion A, my point on this was that it refers to SA7.2, and I suppose I just question, if you've got this idea that you want these two sites to come forward together in some kind of synergistic way, then why not just allocate them together? And my assumption may well have been, well, one's got permission, so it's coming forward anyway, which might scupper that, and it would be lovely if it could be something. But now, if that permission is not in place, I guess we'll have to come on to say what the status of 7.2, and how that, whether that's likely. I know it's to be multiple landowners, but it's not unusual. So I don't know. It just felt a bit like, well. Yeah, I just wondered why you'd got them separate if you thought they could work together.
I can take this. I think at the time of writing, they were under two different schemes and two different kind of permissions at that stage. So if Inspector you'd minded, we can propose a modification to combine both sites together into one.
I don't feel strongly. I just seemed a bit. I just wondered why if there was a reason. You've probably explained that reason.
Yeah, it was at the time of writing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess strongly encourage is one of those words. Well, it's a bit of a so what thing, because presumably if two applications came in separately and we're delivering, the strongly encourage isn't going to stop that happening. I suppose there's no harm in signposting to the two landowners, developers, that there's some potential there to come forward together, and it's in everyone's benefit to speak to each other, I guess. But so fine, okay. I think you've suggested a modification to be. Okay, the only thing about B, I guess, in the modification is this thing that I've asked before, really. Is the TfL very keen, perhaps understandably, to make it clear that there's no access off the North Circular. But my question is, okay, again, no unintended consequences of that. Is there any expectation that it would be accessed off the North Circular, or would it be accessed? Is it accessed off somewhere else anyway? In this case, Station Road, I guess. So it's not adding that reference is it's a belt and braces, but it's not actually having any negative effect.
That's correct. So the planning permission didn't include access from the North Circular, but we would like to, obviously, belt and braces would like to make sure that no future application did that.
Okay, fine. So, G, you said you had a good reason for the tall building, but that was about a different site. So I'm about to ask, a discussion we've just been having about the estate is, we've got a grade 2 star listed building in the vicinity, within the setting of a grade 2 star listed building, and yet you're content with a 33 metre building and reducing to 24 metre building, the grade 2 star listed building being the tube station. So I guess just in the context of what we've just been talking about, and generally I wouldn't have picked this up because we said yesterday about tall buildings we'll deal with through DE6, but because of that discussion it's just sort of flagged up the, is there an inconsistent approach here?
So I guess the reason that grade 2 star listed building, which is Arnos Grove tube station, has been picked up is, well, it is within our borough, so it's a bit of, I think that's previously why that was the Friar Barnet scheme building. Sorry, the Friar Hospital listed building wasn't picked up in that previous application, was just the consistency there. But this one is Arnos Grove Station, which is it's relatively distant from this site, and the impact in the setting is completely different. So, whereas the other scheme, which has dictated some of, has had an influence on the heights in this area, the issue was, you know, going above the ridge line of that building. With Arnos Grove, it's more long views, less impact, and was assessed through the planning application and found to be acceptable. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I probably won't get into that because it's more of a D6, but I just flagged it up here. Parking. Angel, think about parking. And this is about London Plan, just meeting London Plan requirements, and it's PTEL4. So this isn't car free necessarily. So again, I think the question for the council is looking back at how you've considered parking in this area, looking about the opportunity area says about what London Plan says about what it expects about parking that is compliant with the London Plan for PTEL4, consistent with what you're actually seeking to achieve. And again, I'm sort of in your hands to make sure those modifications are actually consistent with what you're seeking to do. And then I think it's up to you again if you want to maintain this text about the on-street parking stuff, which I'm ambivalent about myself. And then I think just flooding, it does actually say incorporate SUDs actually in this one, doesn't it? So, so you have addressed, but then it is in flood zone 2 and 3, I think, according to the EA. I think I'm right. So, and you've put it through the tests. Again, it's just whether or not there would be anything more than what in N it says about flooding. But again, that's an internal consistency approach to how flood risk is addressed. So that's nothing from me, anything more from me on 7.1. Any comments on 7.1? No? Okay, well, we'll take a break now, and we'll come back at 11:20 and then carry on. So thank you. So 11:20, thank you. Okay, thank you. We'll proceed then. We're on 7.2, Aldi. So 203 units and some non-residential space, which I'm assuming is the reprovision of the existing retail. Again, that could probably just be made clear to make sure it's nothing specific, nothing different rather. Again, I guess the question is just the now standard question about status. This one. Oh, sorry. Is there?
Sorry, please. No. Sorry, I missed your question because I was just getting confirmation about the replacement of the reprovision.
Yeah.
Rather.
I've assumed it's the reprovision supermarket. If that is the case, yeah. You're not going to allow a load of community uses or anything. Yeah, just status of this one. Is this is there no indication of a permission or anything?
No, there's no planning permission in place at the moment, so that would implicate the delivery moving to the 10 plus years.
Okay. Okay, there's not much to say about that then. Other than obviously, as well, I said this yesterday, I'm not, well, it'll be how your analysis goes, but I'm not, if the 10 plus years starts at 2030, I'm not necessarily expecting like every single site that has been pushed back all start in 2031, and it's a massive thing. I assume there's some analysis going about which part of the 10 plus years this is more likely to be going in, given what you know about it and the interest in it and so on. And it may be that this is something like this is a more even later in the period. I mean, 203 dwellings. If there's a realistic prospect of coming forward in the plan period, then I'd imagine that 203 is not something that's necessarily going to flow over outside the plan period. It's not that vast number, but clearly we're in a seems like this. I presume this was a call for sites site, so there was somebody promoting it, but there's been no further progression on it.
Yes, that's correct.
I guess I should. Well, this is Ladderswood is obviously ongoing, so that's been, if you like, delivered. So it's been addressed. The last one we talked about, the gas holders had a permission, so that's again leaving that lapse. There might be some expectation. I suppose what I said yesterday about Meridian Water, which was obviously you've got a delivery mechanism and a sort of body in place to sort of drive things forward where some of the allocations might go in. Does the same thing apply to things like New Southgate? Now, I ask that mainly because it's one of these opportunity areas, and you're talking about SPD and stuff. I mean, other than, is there for sites like this, some council mechanism to be, or team or group or whoever who will be like proactively going out and trying to get these things moving?
Yes, we do have a placemaking team that can actively go out to knock on everyone's doors, for example.
Yeah, and it's with the work we referred to earlier that is between the GLA, Enfield, Barnet and Haringey. That's not being led by our service, that is commissioned by this team, basically. So they're trying to coordinate that development and make the case for investment in this area. It might also just be worth mentioning, for further context, that each of the placemaking areas has formed the kind of catalyst for a kind of internal grouping of officers inside the organisation to try and focus attentions onto these areas and be out with the planning process. Just start coordinating and bringing things forward.
It's helpful because obviously when we come to talk about the trajectory, it's one thing to have all of these sort of sites push back and for perhaps for a sensible reason, but then there'll come that question about, well, that's great, but if the reason they've been pushed back is because they're all sort of call for sites and there's no current activity on them, then how can I have any sort of comfort that any of them are going to come forward? And some of them won't, and there'll be other sites that come in and so on. But the fact that there's a proactive element to the council at least provides some comfort there. I think that there's they're not just going to all be left to sort of wait. It's all going to be reactive things. There are going to be some proaction about it. So that's fine. Thank you. We may come back onto that, of course, when we get into those discussions.
Sorry, will I be able to add something? So as I mentioned before the break, we are progressing with some joint SPD or an area planning framework with Barnet. So we have an in-house architectural team who's proactively looking at these sites from a capacity perspective. But we are working with the wider council, like the housing and regen team and placemaking team, to proactively knock on everyone's doors.
That's helpful. Thank you. Slight digression, but it is relevant to some of these things. It just occurs to me how many sites are being pushed back because there is no permissions. There are no permissions even. And then I'm just going to obviously looking at infrastructure requirements, so nothing to add there, plus the mods, that's all sort of standard stuff, and we'll deal with that in at the end, sort of as we go through the modification process if anything's necessary. I will just say here, I did note that in the design principles, there's no reference to strongly encouraging anyone to work with SA 7.1. So obviously if you're bringing forward 7.1, you've been strongly encouraged to work with 7.2, but if you're bringing 7.2, you're not being strongly encouraged to work with 7.1. So I suppose that's if that's considered something that's important, then it probably needs to be added.
That's fine. Thank you, sir.
There's a modification suggested to A, but I think we've already talked about that. And again, I assume, again, looking at the inset map, this would also, well, actually, it says the modification would again bring up the North Circular, but the site doesn't actually abut the North Circular, so I guess it won't be accessed off the North Circular because it's nowhere near. Well, it's not nowhere near it, but it's not. It's not. So again, that's fine. I guess there's no belt and braces if nothing else. Fine, okay. I think so the modification is as it is. Just noting on F and G, particularly G, that tall buildings are not considered appropriate on this site, but they were considered appropriate on 7.1. Of course, 7.1. So again.
Yep. Thank you. So that I think that seems to be an oversight. It should be considered. It is considered appropriate there, as set out in DE6 in the policy maps. So that will need to be corrected. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's yeah. If nothing else, it's. If it's inconsistent with your other bit, then that makes sense to be consistent. I will leave it to you to identify the height in a suggested modification, and we'll come back to that at some point after D6, no doubt. So, thank you. I suppose the only other thing I was going to say, but we've talked about this, and you'll probably say, well, it is doable because we've had this on supermarket sites before. But if the supermarket Aldi's been re-provided, it's whether or not the whole mix of typologies thing is really achievable. But looking at your inset map, you've got sort of blocks and things, so I guess you've worked that through and concluded that it is. So probably don't need to go into it. We've talked about it before, but it is one of the things that with these reprovisions, maybe it's my lack of imagination, but I find it these sort of mix of typologies coexisting with supermarkets and buildings on top of and tall buildings on top of them, but fine. It's probably something that would be obviously addressed to a plan application anyway. On J, the old chestnut of parking. I always like to see what you've said about parking. So parking must be minimised for all residential and non-residential uses, including re-provided retail uses, to ensure consistency with the London plan. So that's not saying that you can't have any parking at all for retail. I guess it would be okay, again, for you to just make sure that you're it's all lining up with what you want to achieve. But it seems logical on the face of it. Say if I was determining an applicant or assessing an applicant, I'd be just referring to parking standards, and it's PTAL 4, so it's not car free. Okay. And then. Heritage. There's no mention of heritage on this one as well, whereas obviously on 7.1 you've got all this specific reference to Arness Grove Tube Station. So I'd assume, unless it's because obviously 7.1 basically wraps around 7.2, I would assume there's some similar issues at to be considered.
So I think, sorry, we need to add in the listed building in Barnet. But in terms of the tube station, it's actually quite a restricted viewing corridor down. There's a road just running. If you, what is that road called? It's essentially the viewing corridor goes down a street that runs down this hill, which you're really only able to see the Gasholder site.
Okay.
So I think it's a very narrow viewpoint, and that's why it wasn't included here.
Oh. Yeah. Okay. Like, it's always handy if you've got a reason for it. Sometimes it's it's an oversight, but sometimes there's a reason. There's a reason for it. Okay. Fine. Sorry, looking at the wrong thing. And then, so the other thing is about flooding. I think it is in. I think. A question mark because the adjacent site is in flood zone 2 and 3. It might be that you've identified this is in flood zone 1, so it's not an issue. I again leave it to you, I think, to do your check on that, and if you're content, it's content. And then okay. And then that's that. Okay. Right, any other comments on 7.2? No? Thank you. Just a few things. So we've done 7.3, so now we get on to Arnos Grove Station. So in terms of status, you refer me to the answer you gave me some minutes ago. So it's, but you might just want to remind me of my note. So I've got it written down again. But it's, so it's, on this one, it's, just go back to my note. So it's a long-standing permission, decided on appeal. You've approved a non-material amendment and the conditions have been discharged. It's behind the hoardings, and so you're expecting, so to all intents and purposes underway, so you're counting it as 5-year supply. So, yeah. Okay. And yes, so the 80 to 89 square metres is a cafe. Fine. So, it's been assessed. Just on the infrastructure requirements, and I guess I'm going to assume this is because they've been picked up through the permission and any 106. I just pick up the novel one here, which is 4. Must provide a contribution towards monitoring and consultation on extension to the CPZ near the development. Is that something that's been, is that part of the permission then, or part of the 106?
Yes, correct.
So would that require, I don't think that is anywhere else. So if, they're all in the same area, would you be expecting all development, all these SA sites to be making similar contributions, or is it something specific to do with this?
Sorry, it's specifically to do with this site.
Okay, fine. No issue then. I was very gratified in a way to see that C&D must retain the existing listed wall and listed lampposts and must retain existing high-value trees, and that's obviously a slightly different approach you've taken. It must maximise. So I'm going to assume that is exactly what the council expects. These are things which you will retain and not maximise or other words, it is accurate. So
Yes, correct, and that's captured in the permission.
so that's good. So that's very clear anyway. So good. So here we do have in G reference to the tall building 27 metres. I guess again because you've granted permission, so you've got some justification as to why you're perhaps doing something here, and that's why you've got this little bit more contextual stuff about this is on account of the sloping topography of the site allowing a taller building, so sort of a bit of rationalisation going on. Again, which might end up would have been RJ in other contexts, but fine. In this location, to not impact on the setting of the listed building. So just to be clear, was the application based on, was the permission granted on the basis there was no harm or neutral harm to the listed building, or was it less than substantial harm outweighed by public benefits? Because that's two different things.
I'd have to look that up for you and to find out what the exact assessment was, but the building in question, so again this is particularity, particularly around the tall building policy and this requirement that if it's not in a tall building zone we shouldn't allow it, and this particular site has a unique topography, so you enter the underground station and go not underground but just in a cutting, but that railway line will then be on a viaduct a few hundred metres down there, so you can see there's a big slope down the site of the car park. That means that the building to the very rear of the site would be defined as a tall building, even though it has, from the street, it appears like a 4-storey, 5-storey building, so not a tall building. So the purpose of this policy is just to make sure that in what has transpired to have potentially been a situation where the site could have dropped out because of the building safety regulator, all sorts of issues, that we might have to have a new application. We already know that something works on this site and has an acceptable impact on heritage and delivers a high quality scheme. So we didn't want to not let that happen again when we knew it was great. So that's the purpose of this policy. It is slightly odd. It's maybe not as straightforward as the other ones. It's slightly particular, but that's the intention of it. And I think in area 7.1 in Appendix D, we've set out in the tall buildings guidance quite stringent guidance around where that building should be located.
Is this, so just to double check, without looking at is this area within the area? You just said something about it being, is this classified as in Appendix D as somewhere where tall buildings would be acceptable?
Yes, that's correct.
Just I thought that was, just double check. Okay, fine, understood. I think the thing I'm always very nervous about is where it talks about not impacting on the setting of a listed building. So say another application come in, and I suppose one question here would be, there's still a chance by the sounds of it that this policy could be triggered, so it might be under construction, but we're not sure. It's not so far advanced that nothing else is going to happen, so it may well be, could be revisions or whatever, so the policy still has a purpose. New application comes in, the implication of in this location not impact on the setting of the listed building assumes, not necessarily unreasonably, that you are not, anything that results in even less than substantial harm is unacceptable, because your starting point is don't impact. Now, of course, you've got policies which allow you to assess the impact and so on and so forth, but again, my assumption would be that you've probably assessed, again, without looking at the permission, you've assessed the thing. There may well be less than substantial harm. It may be at the lower end of the scale, and you may have concluded that the housing and any other benefits outweighs that harm, and that might be a perfectly legitimate position to take. So it may well be about minimising harm, or not leading to unacceptable harm, but rather than saying no harm, which may again be an unintended, albeit laudable, but unintended consequence. And again, this isn't about being carte blanche. It's not giving carte blanche to say you can do what you want, but it's about recognising that there is a mechanism in national and local policy to assess harm against the benefits, rather than just assuming no harm. Okay. Then we've got some standard issues about living conditions and wording for those, and then parking, usual, and then we're talking car free here. Again, I don't know whether that's consistent, but it's just PTAL 6A, so it all seems to be consistent. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the only point the only last point I've made to myself on here is that the reference to the listed building is in relation to the tall building. So I suppose whether that's sufficient in of itself to address any kind of, just a general point about protecting or, respecting, or whatever the words you use, the heritage. But it may be because of the nature of the site that it's sort of all encompassing with the tall building anyway. So, it's sort of what you've got is sufficient. So rather than sort of a general point. But this is very narrow. The criterion G is quite a narrow thing about the effect of the tall building on heritage rather than general. But it may be, again, your knowledge of the site is such that that's the only way it would even be an issue. So it might be fine. So you're going to be looking at all these heritage issues anyway, I think. So
understood, sir.
Okay. Right. Any comments on 7.4? No. Okay. Very quickly then, are we? 7.5. Coppicewood Lodge. So this is a 0.39 hectare site and 45 dwellings. So it gets through on scale because it's more than 0.25, even though it's less than the number, because it would be 50 dwellings, I think I might say. So, okay. The land use requirement just says new homes, which is fine, I suppose, but it would be, I guess, a minute. And it's already, well, it says existing use is not applicable. Principle of development established through permission. So, yeah. So I guess explain to me what the status is there. Is it if it's got? There's no footnote about the permission or anything, so I don't really know what we are. So whether it's got permission, developer on board, under construction, so on.
Yes, so it's consent was granted in 2023 and it's underway. So the last site visit they'd built most of the core and we're building the structure of the building. So definitely advancing.
Is this, again, because it's quite a small site, isn't it? So is this a case of now that if they've got the core built and you're to a certain degree of progress, that this falls into the category that it's unlikely this policy would ever be triggered? Do you think? Is it, not necessarily beyond the realms of a revision, but unlikely?
Yeah, we're pretty certain that it's going to be built. So I don't think the policy will need to be triggered in the future.
Okay. So it may well, if I take a consistent approach to that, what I've said on some of the others would be one that could come out without any, because the 45 dwellings now will be in the trajectory because they're coming forward anyway. So
correct. It's similar to 100 Church Street, which we talked about on Tuesday.
On that basis, I don't think I'm going to go any further. I think I'll leave it there. Unless there's any comments from you, Mr. Byrne, on that side? No? Okay, so yeah, I think if there's no, I mean, again, if it's not serving a purpose anymore, then let's reduce the size of the plan, would be my suggestion. Okay. Other inspectors I know have a different view. Okay, so that's, I think, me done on PL7. Any other, and its allocations, just before we move on, make sure there's no other comments on any of that? No? Thank you. Right, then, move on to PL6 and Southgate, then. We ready? Yeah. So we can do this quite quickly. I think obviously issues about 3.7, figure 3.7 have been discussed. I don't need to talk about that again, as we have with the catch-all, needing to amend the opening to talk about relevance and so on, words to be agreed. So that as well. You've, in terms of criterion 1, there's some modifications. Let me just check what they say. Thank you. Yes, so it's to ensure that so we're the same sort of points. Council will explore the need for preparing a coordinated plan, which could be adopted as SPD. So that's similar to what we're talking about. Developments in this area must be brought in accordance with the guidance. I think you suggested changing. That wording doesn't. Would help if I was looking at the right policy. Sorry. Yes. Neighbouring areas. Yeah. Yes. So you're talking about SPD or subsequent mechanism. The neighbouring areas within Barnet and Enfield must be considered in terms of design impact and town centre catchment to support the hierarchy of town centres. Development in Southgate placemaking should have regard to the guidance that is brought forward. Fine. Okay. Fine. Hey, sorry, I'm just trying to work through in my head how this works in practice and thinking about the discussions we had in some of the others about master plan. You know, why again, no reference to master planning here. Even though why is it different to PL7? You know, and it might be different. One's an opportunity. I don't know if this may or may not be an opportunity area. There's probably again subtleties. I just think I'm thinking again out loud whether or not the way this is worded. The idea is that would it stymie or could it stymie development that comes forward in advance of the SPD, whereas obviously that was avoided in a PL7 by talking about having a master planning approach or if the SPD is there. So it's probably some tweaking along the lines of these just to look at them again. I think when you just to see how they all fit together. And I mean, obviously, there's no particular harm in the council referring to the potential to produce an SPD, as long as it's not then suggesting that you can't bring anything forward before that SPD's been, approved. I think because it's not the same as PL10 and PL11, where you're expecting everybody to equalise and to bring forward things together. So just some potential actions there. And I don't think the wording here about neighbouring areas within Barnet and Enfield must be considered in terms of design impact. That's not that bad, if you like, compared to PL7, where there's a particular reference to a policy. This isn't necessarily saying, Barnet has any influence on Enfield or vice versa. This is just saying, well, you've got to have regard to cross-border issues. So that's reasonable, I think. Okay. I asked a question about 3.82, paragraphs 3.82 and 3.84, whether they're adequately addressed by the policy. And I think you've then suggested a modification to criterion 2 to sort of maybe pick that up. Have I got that right? Yep. Were they slightly different? Yeah, yes, this is in the statement, isn't it? Yeah, sorry. Sorry, we're flicking around a bit, the documents. Sorry, that was a lot. I'm just reminding. Sorry, there was a long pause there while I reminded myself of the issue. The 3.82 is fine. I think the one thing I just wanted to pick up on is 3.84 specifically refers to ASDA and M&S sites coming forward, and I think I just wanted to make the point that I think you've said, well, these might come forward, but they're not, the potential, but you've not allocated them. And I suppose my main question, well, you've seen fit to allocate quite a lot of the supermarkets in these placemaking areas. So what was special or not special, I guess, about ASDA and M&S in this case? Is this because they themselves didn't put anything forward?
As far as I remember, they've come back to say that their site isn't available and want to continue with the operation of their premises, businesses. And therefore requested that the council takes out the site from the plan.
So were they previously identified then in Reg 18 or something? That's why.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
As part of call for sites.
Right, okay. Sorry?
Sorry, I was going to say that as a result, we can take out reference to 3.64 in those circumstances. 3.84.
3.84, I was going to say what? Yeah, 3.84.
3.84.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose it's not helping very much, is it?
It's not necessary, and
yeah.
In the light of what you've heard from Ms. Hope, that would be the right approach.
So, yeah, I think delete that reference. Again, the matter of large site windfalls is probably something we'll come back to at some point, no doubt. Okay, sorry for the long pause. I reminded myself of what I was bothered about. Criterion. I didn't ask. Nothing on criterion 2, 3, or 4, 5. I think I queried about if it was clear and unambiguous about what would be expected in terms of should explore opportunities to enhance community and cultural facilities, including such facilities as Barnet and Southgate College. It's like, well, yeah, again, it's back to who's exploring it, what you're expecting developers to do. I think you've included suggested a mod to make something where appropriate. I'm not sure it necessarily helps. I suppose it might mean that nobody's, people who, coming from something relatively minor or completely unrelated to education don't feel like they're being bound by something. So maybe that's okay. That might also be caught with the catch-all where appropriate. So as long as I think the main thing is not that I'm not entirely sure who's exploring it. It might still be the council will explore opportunities to enhance community and cultural facilities. As part of your activities in coming up with SPD, and then contributions might flow into that should they be deemed suitable, necessary through the SIL regs. But yeah, as long as I think somebody comes forward with a change of use or extension or something, or and then suddenly you're asking them to explore opportunities to improve those services, there might be a question mark over it. So, which was never the intention. So fine, that should be sorted. I asked a question about criterion 6 about clear and unambiguous about circumstances in which change of use would be permitted. And I think you've recognised that the criterion might not be clear and unambiguous and suggested a modification which refers to a lack of demand for such uses or other material considerations justify the proposal. And in justifying the change, you referred to me to policy TC2, which is page 287, which I don't think really necessarily ties in with that criterion because it only refers to residential on the ground floor and simply states that it'll be refused. So I think this is the point being here is that criterion 6 is about. So you've said change of use will not normally be permitted unless appropriate evidence can be provided to demonstrate why it's acceptable. My view as well. What does that mean then? What's appropriate evidence to demonstrate it's acceptable? You've pointed me to TC2, but TC2 is pretty adamant. You can't have ground floor residential. So there's no. I mean, we'll come on to this no doubt whether that's justified or not. But there's absolutely no get out of TC2. So actually, arguably, criterion 6 is in conflict with TC2 by giving applicants the opportunity to have retail uses on ground floors at all. So I guess why is there a different approach? And is there a different approach expected for Southgate to what TC2 suggests? And if so, why?
So that does need some more thought, and rather than deal with that now, because on the face of it, there does seem to be an inconsistency.
Yeah, well, the first thing, am I right? Does there appear to be, is there an inconsistency? I think that's
It
the
appears
first
to
thing.
be
Yeah,
the case, so yes. Yes. I will just check, perhaps if we move on for a moment, so no, we'll just check on TC6. As to,
TC2.
sorry, TC2.
The only other thing I'll say about that criterion is in your suggested mod, you've said, will not normally permit it unless robust evidence demonstrates a lack of demand for such uses or other material considerations justify the proposal. The last sentence, I would say, well, is not, that's always the case. The material considerations apply. That's just referring to section 38.6, so I don't really need to put that in. Where lack of demand for such uses has been demonstrated, that might well be a reasonable sort of, thing you'll take into account, but that doesn't tie in with TC2, which is an absolutely, thou shalt, thou shalt not put residential on the ground floor. This is about, non-town centre uses, which I would imagine is mainly talking about residential. So I think, yeah, all right, leave that with you for a few minutes. I didn't pick up, unfortunately, in this one, in my MIQs, but I did on some others. At least one of the others about the working toward car-free development wording, which I think we discussed in relation to one of the other other policies yesterday, and I think all agreed, or at least I agreed, and you were forced to agree with me that that's not the most appropriate wording, and so needs some tweaking to set out exactly what it is. And I think it was all about, I think there's discussion about, well, new development might be car-free, but then you've got to recognise existing uses which might not be, and so on. So again, I think at the moment it is not clear and unambiguous what you mean there, and so some changes are needed to that. And then again, bring it consistent with general parking issues in all the policies. And then I think criterion 10 refers to key diagram. I think you've accepted that, should I say figure 3.7. It's a minor change, but obviously there is a key diagram, so it could have meant that. But I think you mean 3.7, so that's fine. And then that's my question H. Criterion 11 refers to collaborating with schools on community projects relevant and how it's relevant to decision making. I think you've said, well, I suppose there's no harm in a policy like this referring to things that the council are going to be doing. It's the sort of, there's two elements to all of these sort of high level strategic policies. The council are going to do this, and we expect developers to do this. And that's often in relation to, as you've said elsewhere in the plan, the council will develop a strategy for this or develop SPD. I just thought that the last sentence of that criterion, the council collaborating on community projects with schools, seems extremely sort of parochial and, non-planning related at all. It's not, it sounds, yes, I'm sure the council will do that. It's very good, but it's not really anything to put, I'm not sure it's worth putting in a local plan or has any purpose in a local plan. So I think I would suggest deleting that, unless you've got any strong feelings.
No strong feelings.
Okay, and that's all I have then on the policy. I don't know if you're still thinking about criterion 6, but I'll ask if any comments, Mr. Byrne. No? Okay. Do you want to come back on?
Just, yes, the difference between criterion 6 and 1B is that criterion 6 indicates that change of use to non-town centre uses won't normally be permitted unless appropriate evidence can be provided. So there's a requirement that there needs to be appropriate evidence for it. Whereas TC21B says that proposals for commercial business and service activities are acceptable within Enfield Town and the district centres. Such proposals must provide active frontages to the public realm. Proposals for residential uses at ground floor level here will be refused. And I think there was an attempt at para 329 of our MIQ responses to marry up those two differences, one of which indicates a straightforward binary position as to what would be undertaken, what would be allowed, and the other being more general and allowing for the change would allow then for exceptions. On the face of it, there doesn't seem to be very much in the way of a justification for criterion 6 over TC 2B, and TC 2B can support the position as well as criterion 6. So there wouldn't, on the face of it, need to be anything other than a reference over to TC 26, TC 21B rather.
I think that's, I mean, with all these things, I think if it's not, if in effect the intention was to provide a sort of tacit cross-reference to those policies, but somewhere along the line it's got slightly, you know, yes, the message isn't quite there, then take out the, I would say, yeah, take out the decision-making element of that. So as in, so it would be non-town centre users on the ground floor will be determined in accordance with TC2, and then that removes any ambiguity.
Exactly so, and that's what would happen.
Yeah. As I say, sorry, I've said all this before. There probably might be circumstances where you would, there's specific reasons why the PL policy or the site-specific policy might diverge from the general DM policy. There might be a good reason for that, but if it's not the case, then if that's not intended, then it's better just to cross-reference, I think.
That's right. It's supposed to be more protective rather than less protective. So TC2 would be the right way of doing it.
Okay, thank you. Right, so I'll move on to the allocations. First one being SA6.1 Southgate Office Village.
So if I could draw your attention to the obvious error, there's a duplication on the pro forma with the housing capacity. Just to clarify, it's not a total of 432 units, it is 216.
Thank you. Right, okay. Actually, I hadn't noticed that, so you're right. Okay, so yeah, it's new homes, so it's not a net. So 216 new homes, and then 3,500 square metres of re-provided office space. So, again, I'm not. These figures aren't as critical, but I'm assuming if it's re-providing the office space, then it's not 3,500 square metres additional. It's not net increase. That would be a gross figure than a net figure. My assumption, but you'll correct me if I'm wrong. You've got, so yes, the site has been, again, it is subject to a planning permission from dated 2019. So I think the first thing says, yeah, where we are with that.
Thank you, sir. So the permission was granted at appeal in 2021. Since then, I've been advised that the developer has been submitting conditions. They haven't submitted a non-material amendment with regard to second stair, but as I say, they've been submitting conditions to keep the application still live, and from a planning service perspective, we are of the opinion that they are still seeking to implement the scheme, but it hasn't commenced on site.
So just to clarify, sir, that would move into the 5 to 10.
Yeah, so part of the 5-year supply. Okay. So sorry, it's a permission. Full permission. And so, yeah, sorry, I would say, so it's granted 2021, but by virtue of the fact they are discharging conditions, then it's keeping it alive. Yeah, that's amazing. So it's alive. It's alive. Right, okay, that's fine and helpful. I've noticed the reference to conservation area and so on. So, but we know that it's obviously a development that's been deemed acceptable. So, in principle. That's that. The infrastructure requirements are just the general points, I think, about what we've gone over ad nauseum. I don't need to mention those again. I'll just get back to the any proposed modifications. Okay, so on G, we've got, tall building no more than 30 metres, and then obviously reference to the Southgate Circus conservation area, and then I've noted the suggested modification to refer to the respond appropriately to the guidance within the character of growth study. I mean, okay, but, by the same token, the character growth study, from what I've been seemingly, obviously, what I've been heard over the last few days and what I'll hear, no doubt, this character growth study is probably relevant to everything. So why it's just been referenced here as something specific is, there might be a good reason for it, but ultimately, it's required. The council will assess the effect of development on the conservation area based on whatever information it seems fit. I'm not sure it's absolutely necessary to refer to the character growth study, albeit what Historic England wanted.
I think what the intention of that amendment from Historic England and what was agreed in our statement of common ground is the detail that we go into in terms of analysing the impact on the conservation area of tall buildings, and which they were supportive of. I think, given that obviously we've talked about the Arnos Grove site and the use of that policy for, if that project was to drop off, what if this one dropped off? I think flagging that piece of evidence that helps inform how an applicant could respond to the sensitivities of the heritage assets in the area and the conservation area is helpful. But we probably need to put a specific reference to which particular part, given the size of that document.
Okay. Okay, I mean, I think the point would be is if it's sort of relevant here, then if it's relevant in other sensitive locations as well, and it is helpful, then it might be helpful. I mean, we should, I think, seek to minimise the number of references there are to documents that aren't part of the development plan, and having regard to is. And respond appropriately to the guidance. Maybe having regard to the guidance would be better, because at least that's sort of consistent with how we tend to deal with that approach when you're talking about non-development plan documents. Again, sorry, like a stuck record. If you've got reason justification here, I think this would be where you'd talk about the character growth study and the reason justification. I think you'd be saying, well, the policy is about impact and effect, and then when describing how the council will go about considering that, refer to the character growth study. We don't have that, so it might be that's where we do need to be slightly, expanding these things where I wouldn't normally want to. So to be pragmatic about it. So fine, okay. So when you're doing your action about, maybe it's worth thinking about, well, okay, if we've said this here and we think that's really helpful here, are there examples? It doesn't have to be every single one, but if there's particular examples like Arness Grove or something like where you think actually the sensitivities are such that it'd be useful to put that in, and that's fine.
Noted, sir, and I think it's worth maybe just giving you an example of how that study has been used. So as part of that, we have essentially it's a series of viewpoints located in View City, and we're just able to give that out as essentially like a spreadsheet to developers who can then plug that into their model, and it's a useful starting point for an application coming in. If there's a sensitivity, just here's a bunch of viewpoints, plug it in, test it, and we have a common understanding. So it is helpful, but I completely take the point that we need to think about which sites we need to flag that.
When we get to them, it might also be something that goes into the, if it's not already there, because like I say, I've read everything, but I can't bring every single paragraph to mind. If in the heritage policies, the general heritage policies, it could be that that's referred to, if it's not already referred to, but there's a tool that can be used to help the council assess the harm, but also applicants, come up with acceptable proposals in the first place. That might be something, but it may be flagged up already. But if not, that might be again something to think about. You've got some standard stuff here about living conditions and so on, and parking. But now, so parking, you've said here, car free, ensuring alignment with the London plan, but it's PTEL 4. So actually, that isn't aligned with the London plan. Again, if car free is something you think is appropriate here for various reasons, that might be fine. But I think that's what I'm saying about being careful to align it with the London plan, and then people go off and read the standards and say, well, PTEL 4 is not car free. Then you get into a mess. So I think obviously you can go away and look at this. I think I'm right in saying that the residential parking stands for PTEL 4 and not car free.
Thank you, sir. We'll take the point on consistency. Did you have anything?
Yeah, it's not, well, it is consistency point. It's also an effectiveness point as well, wasn't it? It's, sorry, I'm just... There's a point at which laptops don't like how many documents I've got open, and it's starting to crawl. I'm trying to find the parking standards again.
So if I may add, the site is right next to Southgate Station. So we'll just double check the PTEL rating. But Southgate Station served by the Piccadilly line, at least six trains per hour, I think it is. At least 6 trains per hour heading into central London. So we'll check the PTEL on that. Yeah,
it might be one way or the other. It might be the table's wrong, in which case fine, or it might be you want to say actually here because of the, again, a RJ point, because of the access, because of the proximity row, so we think car free is justified here, and that's therefore we want to not use the parking standard, because I think parking standards for South London PTEL 4 is 0.5 to 0.75 spaces per dwelling. So yeah, okay, yeah. Well, in fact here, because it would be the London plan. When considering development proposals that are higher density or in more accessible locations, the lower standard here should be used. So I guess 0.5 would be but accessibility is supposed to be about PTEL. Right, thank you on that. And so nothing more from me on that. Mr. Byrne, have you any comments on that? Good. So we'll move on to 6.2, Barnet and Southgate College. Can someone point me in the direction.
So it's page 546.
Thank you. Right, so, okay, this is an unusual one, I suppose. So the allocation here is for a lot of potential uses, lots of coulds and maybe possibles, but it should provide college campus facilities with potential for some other co-located facilities and maybe some housing in the right locations. Subject to design. So with no floor space figures, no housing figures. So I suppose, and I couldn't find any modifications to this one in E6.1, so I'm working on the basis that you're content with this one as it stands. So perhaps you could just walk me through why this is allocated and you know what your actual intention for it. It just seemed a little bit vague's the wrong word, but you know, flexible, maximum flexibility, and also I suppose you know, why is this being allocated? These uses are not going to come forward anyway if it's sort of education. So just a bit of understanding of the context.
Thank you, sir. Earlier on in the plan making process, we did have a site promoter coming forward on behalf of Barnet and Southgate College, and their intention was to re-provide the college campus that was modern and fit for current purposes within that enhanced landscaping realm. And that was to be complemented by co-located facilities such as SEN provision and youth facilities as well. And to enable that to happen, there was also an element of residential units proposed as part of the scheme. So initially it was around 216 units, but as the plan kind of progressed, we didn't hear back from the promoters of Barnet and Southgate College, hence why we are supportive of development coming forward, but we don't have physical numbers within the site allocation itself.
Okay, so obviously you're not relying on this to meet any. There's nothing in the trajectory. You're not relying on it to meet any targets, whether it be for housing or any other use. Okay, so is the reason it's in the plan? Again, looking at the heritage considerations, there's quite a lot in detail in there. So there's obviously some issues around there potentially, and there may be other characteristics that you want to make sure there's a policy in place to guide development. Is that the purpose? It's an aspiration policy. It's an area where if it wasn't allocated, it's sensitive enough, I guess, to want to have a bespoke policy to guide development, not necessarily rely on DM type policies. I guess from a soundness point of view, I suppose, is it justified to have this, I guess, effective? I guess the other side isn't doing any harm in having it in there.
I'm just drawing some comparisons to St Anne's on this one. Obviously, we know it needs to remain in educational use. In order to sustain that and fund what is required on that site in terms of education, there's going to be an element of residential required. So it would be helpful to us if we could keep that residential allocation, albeit we don't know the quantum that's coming forward. So if the allocation were to remain, it would certainly be the 10 plus era. So I just wanted to draw that comparison.
Yeah, I mean, you say there are no numbers, so I think it would be a case of, well, what's the purpose of it? Is it sort of a sound allocation when it doesn't deliver a particular number? In principle, I can see an argument for that. If it's a particularly, there are other examples I can think of. Particularly, it's like maybe a particularly not necessarily education. There's a very contaminated site. You're not sure it's going to come forward, but you put it in the plan because you want to encourage people to bring it forward, you want to show support for it coming forward, and if it comes forward, great, and the numbers can go in. I mean, it's from a numbers perspective, it's almost like it is like a large site windfall again, isn't it? You haven't counted any of there, but it wouldn't be counted as a windfall because it's in the plan, but it's really a windfall because you don't know what the numbers are. These things do exist, so okay. I think I'll bear all that in mind and in my thought process. Okay, fine. I think I'll take all that away with me. I think whether there's any issues, but we should go through the wording just for completeness. On the infrastructure requirements, it's the standard sort of stuff, so nothing particularly from me. Again, might need just to have a consistency check, but also a SIL check, and I'll advise on the wording for that in due course. In A, I suppose A should be designed on the principle that the college could become a more open anchor institution to the local community. I guess I sort of, what does that mean from a decision-making point of view?
Hi, sorry. I guess I think one of the things this policy does achieve is trying to set some kind of design principles on this site, regardless of what the exact use of the site could be. These are fairly universal, you know, talking about connectivity into the wider public realm, and I guess putting, you know, positive frontage to the community. So currently the site is, you know, your classic kind of modernist college campus with a big tower in the centre. Just looking at it on Google Maps, it's very set back from the main road. The entrance is a bit hidden. There's lots of service bits and bobs all over the place, but you know, lots of backs of the building. So I think in general, the design principles here are seeking to, you know, extend the urban grain, make the college something that has a proper civic presence. And when we're talking about the open anchor institution, that's what it's referring to. Is it's facing the town centre rather than being tucked away, which it currently is.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry. I think again that'd be one of those things that the policy would be fine if you could add the words to just say an anchor. As far as working anchor, yeah, all of that what you just described would be quite useful sort of text. I mean, maybe whether that can all go, whether some of this could go into the PL 6 supporting text, just to explain, you know, in terms of when you list the allocations, maybe some of these ideas about what you want to see, you know, the vision for these allocations, because you can't put it in this area, maybe it goes in there where it's a bit more, it's just a housing site, no, fine. But if you've got something a bit more bespoke here, and it's obviously this is a bit of a novel allocation, some of those ideas might be worth going in there if they're not already, just to flesh it out a bit.
I think it would be really helpful to keep them in somewhere, just because it would be a really useful starting point for any site that comes forward, and avoid unnecessary delays where we have to explain that vision to them.
I think if you, I think explaining that vision quite helpful without a very long criterion A. I don't particularly want to start saying to the council, you know, you've got to start introducing a new format to Appendix C to accommodate some of these ideas. But if there's scope, it might be more difficult in the URB, the sites which aren't part of placemaking areas, but where you've got a placemaking area in the colleges. If the college is a central idea to that vision for the whole placemaking area, then there's no harm, I think, in just fleshing that out a bit in the RJ if it's not already done to your satisfaction. Some of that may end up being, I mean, that maybe again I'm going beyond my brief, and some of that could be an additional modification. I don't know about necessity for sounds, but I think it's something to think about. Yeah, there's obviously some general points we've talked about before about how you deal with things like heritage. Again, just an example of what your thought process here, when how you're thinking about making sure all these wordings tie in together and they're all consistent. Here you've got should carefully consider its relationship with the listed buildings along the high street. That to me is not a wording which is very effective, because carefully consider. Well, we applicants, they could say yes, we've carefully considered it, but here's a 75-metre high glass building which bears, but we have carefully considered it. What you really mean is, don't result in unacceptable harm, or responds, respects the, that sort of thing. It's an outcome, isn't it? You're expecting an outcome, not a process. So that's just one of those sets of words where I think, when you are looking at these wordings again, some of these wordings are going to be fine. Don't get me wrong. Some of you will look at it as an approach that we're happy with that, fine. But I'd say these are the kinds of wordings where I'd be like, well, it doesn't really work. So I'll flag it up now just as a reminder. There is a point in I about rear guard, secure the rear garden boundaries of existing homes. So there's quite a few policies which talk about securing the rear gardens. I'm not going to get into that, so yes, fine, okay. But I just a living conditions point again. So you've got living conditions of there are residential properties around it. So I guess, again, because it's flagged up in other policies of being consistent, then you might want to just pick up those points. I think I understand what the securing of form words which have a little bit of a, but I assume it means you have some form of, it's not a rear garden or existing rear boundaries sort of entering, I don't know, going into dead space or something. There's actually some.
Yeah, I think it's thank you, sir. I think it's just it's a common approach to, I guess, good urban design of just having, your private back gardens on each other rather than having, as the current condition is, a kind of service yard going into the fence. So it's just generally try to promote that. But I think in this particular site, because the use could be anything and it could have whatever use is in programme, setting out those principles is quite helpful at the start, just to give whatever use inside something to react to.
Okay, it's very easy. Basically, general living conditions point. Parking. Parking, there's no mods for this, so you've said car free to promote active travel. It's PTEL 2 to 5, so some parts of it are within that, some parts might not. I guess it's quite a big site, so it covers that. I think the way the London plan works is if it would be if it's 2 to 5, you'd pick 5. Is your starting point? You sort of peg it to the highest PTEL rating, is that?
I was just going to say yes, let's go with that.
Yeah, I don't,
we'll check, but
tell me if I'm wrong, but and I don't think there are any standards for education. So whether or not, again, car free is practical for an education use, again, I think it's for you to go away and just think about. And then just where was I? Yes, the last point, as the site will incorporate bespoke mixture of uses, be essential to develop engaged pre-application discussions. Obviously, that can be deleted because you've got your SCI for that and your standard requirements. So I don't think that's probably to be deleted. And of course, it would apply to any use anyway. So delete that.
Thank you, noted.
Okay, any comments on that, Mr. Byrne? No? Right then, so 6.3, the Minchendon Car Park and Alan Pullinger Centre. Time-wise, all right. So quite a small site. 33 dwellings to be delivered in the next 5 years. Currently a youth centre and car park within the sort of midst of a conservation, conservation areas and some other heritage assets. Splits between Lee Hunt Drive splits between the two. So don't think I've seen reference to any permissions or anything. So I don't know if, but you'll correct me. Just tell me where we are with this one.
There's nothing current in place. It's in the ownership of the council, and it's been promoted to us by our property services.
It's only 33 dwellings, except that. So it's not, you know, if it were to start in the next 5 years, I imagine it could be delivered in the next 5 years. But is there any likelihood or prospect of being started in the next 5 years?
Just to say, we are aware there's a feasibility study being undertaken, so yes.
Right, so you think there's a reasonable chance it's going to come forward? Okay.
I do, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, if I may as well, just checking the HELA and the capacity calculations there. This site was actually put forward as 2 separate copper sites, and I think we've just got the translation from that spreadsheet into this has just, we've missed a couple of units. So the actual figure that was calculated was 56 dwellings across both sites, so we just need to make a note of that and update that. It's not that many homes.
Okay, again, go back into my soundness mindset. It's, yeah, 33 would not be justified because you've got evidence that it'd be more, so I think it's fine. Okay, 56, and we're not talking about big strategic stuff. But so the council are doing a feasibility study, so that gives you the comfort that you know they are moving forward with it. And say 56, 30 or 56, if it were to be one would assume again that it's a one or 2 year delivery at most for that. And so for permission, and I genuinely can't see why you'd have to have outline permissions for all these things. So just get on with it. So full permission within hopefully 2 or 3 years, then be on site. And so yeah, might be at the end of the 5 year period perhaps, but maybe there's a chance. Okay. I suppose the outline might come if the council will need to get outline permission in order to then to move it on, but I don't know. I'm not getting into that. That's too much detail, isn't it? Is the re-provision of the community use an absolute? No, is it, or is it? This is presumably due to the feasibility. What comes out of the feasibility study? We'll see. It's only because it should, you know, it should re-provide the community use. You know, it's always, is that what you mean? It should, or it could, or we'd be open to it.
Yes, the council's quite would want to protect the community uses, and if we needed to relocate it, we'll find another a site for the community uses. But I don't see why it can't be combined within the same development.
Okay, fine, that's fine.
Sorry, also just to add, we've got PTAL 4 noted on the PTAL line, but I think we'll double check that. Again, that it's very close to Southgate station, as I mentioned, for Southgate Office Village. It's just a stone throw away, so we'll double check that.
Okay, fine, thanks, yes, good. Okay, so all the usual sort of things about infrastructure requirements I'm not going to talk about. Maximise retention of existing high-value trees. Again, I think we've talked about that enough. It's either if that's what you mean, fine. But if it's actually you mean retain them, then say it. It could be different. Fine. I think the only thing I've noticed on B, and it's purely because again it's a novel thing, is I think this one talks about biodiversity enhancement specifically, but I think it is more in a streetscape sort of view than it's trying to replicate BNG. So fine, I don't think I'm going to make too much of that.
Inspector, sorry, if I might just come back on the PTEL point. The PTEL for this particular site is PTEL 5. We've just realised that TfL have updated their PTEL ratings during the examination.
Okay.
So we'll take a general action to look at all the PTEL ratings in the plan. Thank you.
Okay, no, it should be accurate. I mean, counting those as sort of supporting text and helpful information, but it may as well be accurate. I think I'd probably say these are additional mods rather than main mods at the moment, unless it's sort of, yeah, because I suppose if it leads to a change, the main mod would be if it led to some kind of change to the criteria on the back of that. So if it's suddenly become PTAL 6 and so you're going to go for car free or something, then that's a main mod. But if it's just bringing those things up to date, then they're probably additional mods. That's
Brilliant, thank you, Inspector, that's helpful.
mainly because I don't want to read all them. No, that's not true, obviously. Okay, but PTAL 5, so fine. So car free, this would be potentially car free then. But yes, D, dense vegetation. The only thing, sorry, is the only thing on D, and this might be a local knowledge thing, on D, it must remove existing barriers such as the brick wall, fine, and dense vegetation on the southern edge of the Allen Pullinger Centre. My only thing is, presumably, the dense vegetation doesn't include existing high-value trees, because we want to get rid, but it might be, but you would know that more than I. So.
We'd have to double check, but it is quite dense vegetation along Lee Hunt Drive.
I suppose it's just making sure that in one policy you're not saying retain these, and then by the same token, it just so happens some of those trees up into the area you've said remove, but they could be completely separate, and it's very clear. So I'll leave that. Leave that with you.
Noted, thank you.
So tall buildings are not acceptable here. Nobody's here to argue otherwise. That's fine. And actually, yes, to be fair, I was going to say on J, it says must deliver car free, and I was going to say, well, can you justify that because it's PTAL 4, but if it's not PTAL 4, then fine, that's fine. Just double check any mod on that. Yeah. The only thing I note on the modification that you've suggested is that the existing car park should not be re-provided, so that's very specific and clear. And I guess it's already, because it is partly community centre, partly car park, isn't it? I was looked at that one. So if the council is content that that's not going to cause any problems in terms of local parking provision or traffic issues, then that's, I guess, up to you. So I don't know, fine, so fine. Okay. And that's, I think, let's say living conditions a point, because I think there are people living nearby. So again, it's more of a, well, are there people living nearby was the question actually, but if there are, then just for matters of consistency, you might want to mention that, and I don't think flooding's an issue, so no. So any other comments on that? No? Good, that was easy. So I think we're done. So thank you then. So actually, as we have got to 22:01, we'll break now until 2 o'clock, and we'll come back and do Palmer's Green. I should imagine that would be quite quick. Oh, sorry, is there something you want to?
Just don't forget there's a fire.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, we'll come back at 2:05. Thank you, I'd forgotten. So we'll come back at 2:05. Mr. Burney, is there anything you wanted to say? Because you've been, I won't say unusually quiet.
No, I've just been listening interested. I'm sorry, sir. I just have one comment, and I'm not sure if it's relevant still, but there's a site just to the north of the one we've just discussed, which isn't in the plan, but is now coming forward of 82 homes. It is a large site, but it is coming forward as a office conversion site. And I wouldn't have mentioned it, it's only that there is another office conversion site in the plan later, because I would have just thought, well, it's just a windfall site. So I just wanted to mention it in case it should be in there, because it's we've seen these are often precursors to land coming forward for development more comprehensively. So we've seen a number of times when they secure a permitted development and then go, right, and it's quite a big site, we're now going to develop the whole thing. And it was more just to mention it in case it actually is a new site.
Right. Okay.
That was it. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. I mean, say it's an emission site. I mean, clearly, being if something's coming forward as a windfall, then it should be by the time we get to the trajectory. One would assume. And then if it's and then obviously the rest of it's an emission site. I think there is an issue about large site windfalls, and then and how if and how we count them, and then if and how we count them, what does that mean for everything else? And it may be the council have got, say, well, they're content with the approach they've taken, and that's it. So yeah, I can't really go with it because there's nothing before me on that one. So okay, things will happen around, I suppose. I think so. But thank you for that. So right, I'm going to leave it now. Then adjourn until 2 o'clock, and if I don't think you're coming back, so thank you. Have a good weekend, and I'll no doubt see you again. Thank you. 2 o'clock.